Hello and welcome to the podcast for the review of the Week 5 games for 2020. Bit of a different Four Turkeys episode this week. Two of the turkeys have been plucked. I suspect because their teams were on bye weeks. Both Blacky and Fuey have bailed on the podcast. I'm joined by Brasher, of course, the reliable veteran member of the podcast. How you going, Brash?
I'm well, mate. How are you this evening?
Yeah, pretty good. Still pondering Fuey's excuse for not appearing, which was in a text message. I'm doing a stock take tonight, and after my stock take, my vocal cords will be tired. So that leaves me with an open question about what sort of a stock take involves exercising vocal cords. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's doing a stock take of chicken McNuggets or KFC nuggets. I don't know. But anyway, so that was his excuse. I suspect he may actually have been a little bit scared by the guests we've got this week, which is Sven, long-time board poster and first-time podcast appearance. How you going, mate?
I'm going very well, thank you very much.
Excellent, great to have you on board. And a return appearance for this season by someone whose first appearance hasn't yet been posted. It was that good. It was so good, we've kept it in the vault. Shuttlesworth, how you doing?
Good, thanks, mate. Hello.
And we have a repeat appearance from last week. Aussie Dudes agreed to step in at the last minute so that because you couldn't possibly have a podcast without a Packers fan.
Oh, you can. It's just maybe not as much fun.
Actually, I'll put you on mute. That's a pretty good idea. So welcome, guys, and thank you to everybody that's filled in for our normal panelists. It was a pretty weird week, pretty amazing week. I think in the space of 7 days, Brash, or 8 days, we had 2 general managers and 2 coaches fired. We had... Well, depending on who you believe, one of them fired himself twice. We had the season's leading passer, I believe, severely injured. We had a couple of different 49ers quarterbacks get hooked. Really entertaining games. So where do you want to start, Brash? What was your high point of the week?
Oh, the fact that that weekdays are for NFL football now with this COVID rescheduling. We started watching football on Friday and it only just finished mid-afternoon today. And actually this week is still going.
It's the first time we've ever recorded a podcast while it was still around running in the regular season, I should say. So that in and of itself is groundbreaking. They're probably going to prosecute us for breaching the broadcast agreement by infringing on someone's broadcast rights. Aussie Dude, what was your view of the best game of the week?
I have to really go back. It's been quite a while since it started, but I enjoyed little bits of the Thursday night game, which is probably the first time I've said that for a while, and won't be saying that for a couple of Thursdays to come with the schedules for them. But sure, a couple of others are not going to agree with this at all, but I quite enjoyed the Vikings Seattle game. It was basically a tale of two halves. The Vikings couldn't do much wrong in the first half, but then just Seattle woke up and Cook got injured, sadly again, for everyone. But game of the week was absolutely Monday night. Just couldn't quite get Herbert over the line, but I said last week that was probably one of the ones I was looking forward to the most, and it ended up being one of the ones that I enjoyed the most, just seeing Herbert, I was actually awake for a change, and just seeing how he is already developing pretty well and could potentially become the best quarterback in the class for this year.
Sven, mate, you're the new bloke on the block. We better address the elephant in the room, given Aussie Dude so politely brought it up as a fellow NFC North supporter. What is up with the Vikings? How can you lose a game when the other team doesn't convert a third down? Goodness me.
Look, as a number of people in the press have pointed out, it's the most Vikingest of Viking losses in recent memory. So the fact that the Vikings found a new way to lose a game that didn't involve a kicker is a plus. A number of people have brought up the analytics mob and whether or not should have gone for it on fourth down, but I completely agree with the decision to go for it on fourth down to keep the ball out of Wilson's hands. And surprise, surprise, Wilson marched down the field and won the game. So I think the fact that Seattle won the game backs up the decision to go for it on fourth down. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the end around on the previous play. I've never seen Thielen convert an end around, so I don't know what they were doing there. I definitely know why they didn't pass the ball. The O-line is in a complete shambles. But, for me, obviously the Viking game was game of the week for me. But, it just reinforces what being a Viking supporter is all about.
Shuttlesworth, best 1-4 team in history.
I wouldn't go that far. I think we are getting looked at a little harshly in terms of the way we've lost to who we've lost. But I think it definitely was a tale of two halves, as Ozzy said. I think to start the game and for most of the first half, we saw it working exactly as Zimmer built it and dreamed it would work. Obviously, running the ball, getting to the quarterback, helping the young DBs out. But I think he just got outcoached in the second half, didn't make any adjustments. We didn't get to Wilson at all. I agree with Sven as well. That drive, Madison's working the left side over, Boone's punching a few through, and then we decided to mix it up and do the end around reverse to Thielen. To his credit, he almost got it, but I think that was a little bit of a combo breaker that we didn't need.
Almost is such a Vikings term, isn't it, really? I feel for you.
Well, I mean,
question.
It does help a bit. You do get a little bit numb to it. It sucks at the time, but we're experienced. We get over it pretty quick.
I'm one who doesn't agree with the fourth down play, or at least not the play that they ran. I just think that you kick the field goal and then at worst you send it to overtime, because if you don't stop them for a touchdown, you at least get a chance to stop them on their 2-point conversion, which, as it ends up being, they went for 2 to force you to try and get a field goal and they failed anyway. But I just think that a team like the Vikings, your defense had been pretty good in the first half and was starting to close down a little bit more. I thought that at least show a bit more faith, because maybe if Cook was in, I would have agreed with going for it on fourth down, but just feel that even if you gave up the touchdown, you still had to stop them from getting the 2-point conversion to even send it to overtime.
Brash, how did you feel? Did you get a chance to watch it, mate?
Yeah, I did. It was. Look,
wait, hang on. I gotta preface it by saying I know you have such love for Pete Carroll that you would have been gobsmackingly inspired by his coaching. Yeah.
He doesn't coach at all. He just stands on the sideline and cheats, and Wilson just runs around like a farmyard chook in the backfield, right? So look, I've seen it enough times. Wilson scoring it, and I don't get the go for to ice the game or to put it away by going for it on fourth down, because I would probably have put a fair bit of my hard-earned on Seattle converting a 2-point anyway, right? Because it's Wilson. He just does that stuff. Where they screwed up is why they didn't go for 2 when they went up by 5 earlier. Because if they'd gone for 2 earlier in the fourth quarter, then they could have kicked the field goal and been 9 up, and it would have been all over. So they didn't have their ready reckoner for when I go for 2 points correct. So, because I think they went up by 5 with the extra point. If they go up by 2, see, whether it's 4 or 5 is relevant, really. So if they go up by, if they kick if they go for the 2 points earlier in the fourth quarter, they go up by 6. They could have kicked the field goal on their last possession, go up by 9. So what if Seattle scores? Even with 2-point conversion, they're still a point behind. So that's where I think they screwed up their strategy. But it was just another one of those games where there were a lot of these to and fro games over the weekend, and I think every one of them went the wrong way on what I was backing.
Fuey would be proud of you, my boy. He'd be absolutely in awe of the fact that you finally took his betting advice.
Just every game, like the Monday night football game. I thought the Chargers were going to get home, Saints get up. I follow a very simple fandom approach on Monday mornings. It's obviously 49ers, following by cheering for whoever is playing the NFC West teams, following by anyone playing NFC teams. So I'll always cheer for the AFC team versus the NFC team, just from a playoff making perspective, yeah? And every single result went the wrong way for me. anyway, that's
Except the Eagles lost. You got to be happy with that.
yeah. But I sort of well, the thing about the Eagles now, and I assume we'll talk about it a little bit now. I think my 5 wins to win the NFC East is looking damn good right now.
What about my multiple ties? I'm still quite set on that prediction. Before we get into that, I did just want to I wanted to give my input on the Vikings Seahawks game, which was when that play for the attempt at the fourth down conversion. If their aim was to keep the ball out of Wilson's hands, they clearly executed the wrong play. What they needed to do was run the ball backwards, almost into their own end zone, and then do a whole series of laterals and ideally burn about 15 seconds off the clock, because there wasn't no other way that they were going to keep the ball out of Wilson's hands for long enough to stop him from threatening the scoreboard. In all seriousness, the things, because Wilson has had a lot of credit, and obviously DK Metcalf had a great game and everybody was glowing about him, but there's a couple of kind of things that didn't really get a lot of coverage after the game. And the first one was the Seahawks actually scored 3 touchdowns, and this is a very Vikings thing to give up. 3 touchdowns in 1 minute and 53 seconds in the third quarter. And that's 2 of those 3 were off by their defense, taking the ball away, basically. And then the other thing, which again didn't get a lot of press, but the Australian punter for the Seahawks, and this is, I think, the 3rd week in a row we've actually praised, or at least I have praised an Australian punter. Michael Dixon had 4 punts that put the Vikings back inside their own 20, and 2 of those were down inside the 10. So as good as Wilson is, it's not a one-man band. They've actually got a pretty reasonable contribution across the board. So that was kind of my perspective, not to get too bogged down in stats.
So when you're trying to talk about the Seahawks being a well-balanced team, you go from their quarterback who's playing MVP level to their punter.
Yeah. Well,
I think there's about 22, 23 players in between that.
Yes, but punters are people too, and good ones are consistently good ones that can put the ball inside 20, few and far between. The other thing that I would say, just quietly apart from how aggravating it was to watch Pete Carroll win another close one, God, I hate that man, was it, and this is a question mainly for Sven and Shuttlesworth initially, but I think back to one of the things as a neutral fan when I look at another team, one of the things I look for is the coach evolving, and I think of Bill Parcells, and he evolved as he moved from team to team. I think of Carl Shanahan this year. He's very different and much improved on what he was previously. Andy Reid, he's finally learned the balance between passing and running. And God forbid he's even learned how to manage the clock in a game, which he could never bloody do when he was coaching for us in Philly. I think back to when we just about blanked the Vikings in that playoff game in Philadelphia with Foles, behind quarterback. I thought, that'd be fine because next year Zimmer will be better and the Vikings will be better. Has he grown as a coach? Because I kind of get the feeling that he's, at least from my perspective, I can't see that he is growing. Or is that just me being too harsh?
I can jump in on that. The situation with the Vikings is that Zimmer doesn't call the offense. He relies on the offensive coach to call the offense. And yet again this year, we're on the 4th offensive coach in 4 years. So to talk about any consistency in the Vikings play calling, it's got the same flavour in that it's a run-first team and things like that. But you are, last year it was Stefanski, the year before that, Di Filippo, it just goes on and on and on. So now from a defence perspective, Zimmer has been remarkably consistent, and I do think that this year is different because there's been just a massive overhaul on the defensive side, and you might make the observation that in the second half, Pete Carroll outcoached and made more adjustments to the game plan. But when you've got a team that's just got no experience on the defence, you can't just change the defensive scheme like that. You've got to go into the game with a plan, and the plan worked for half a game, which from a Viking supporter perspective is at least we got half a game out of the defence, because that they were the first signs all season that the defence could actually do anything. So, I'll probably just leave it there.
Shuttlesworth?
Yeah, I mostly agree. I just wonder whether he would have gone so young and inexperienced in the defensive backfield had he sort of known how this season was going to play out. Obviously, one of the big moments in the game, I think it was 4th and 10, when Metcalf and Dantzler just completely lost it. It's just inexperience and that kind of thing. And it makes you wonder whether Zimmer went in thinking he'll have more time to sort of groom and teach these guys the odds and ends of how his scheme would work. But obviously that didn't happen due to COVID and whatnot. So we sort of left with the situation we have. And if there's no pressure on the opposing quarterback, these young guys have been getting cut up. Another one like Holton Hill, when he's been in, good route runners have just been, running him off his legs. But I'm happy to see that it did work for half the game, and hopefully going forward, that pressure will still be there.
Because obviously it's a massive loss not having Danielle Hunter and a number of the others, are in the season. So, but yeah, for me it was just really interesting game because I get what you're saying about Zim is obviously mostly a defensive coach, but I'm just not sure I've seen him evolve. But obviously I'm not as close to it as you guys are. Aussie dude, you what's your view? You seen much of a change in the approach?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell simply because of like the whole disrupted off season. Like the last few years, he's lost 3 or 4 assistant coaches, maybe more to other teams because there's a couple have gone on as head coaches. But look at some of the players that they lost in the off season. Some they wanted to get rid of, like Diggs, but especially on the defensive side, like they basically had to completely retool and overhaul the defense. They lost people at just about every level, especially like their defensive line isn't what we're accustomed to when we watch a Vikings game, and the corners are young. They're showing flashes of the talent that they'll eventually become, which I'm not entirely impressed with because it means we have to play against them 2 or 3 times a year, depending on where we go. But, they're rookies. They're going to be inconsistent. So you expect them to have up games and down games. And they showed, most of it was in the first half. They showed some good things. But, like they were saying, the 4th down, 4th and 10 along the sideline to Metcalf, where the corner just got lost and I'm not sure if it was a mix-up on the play because we've seen a lot of busted coverages on defense all year in just about every team. So sometimes it's people are expecting over-the-top help or, especially with rookies, they've had such a limited time to really learn the playbook, and a lot of the college teams don't have a whole lot of in-depth terminology, so a lot of it is new for these rookies. But I think part of it is just, it's a combination of things. I don't think we can really say, is he struggling to evolve as a coach, or is he just losing too many players and too many other coaching personnel that really help the other coaches? Because you look at a lot of the other teams that consistently at the top, you don't see a whole lot of coaches from the Patriots or the Chiefs lately that do take head coaching jobs, or if they do tend to struggle. But they've had assistants in the system for long enough that they have been expected to get promoted to a coordinator and development a lot faster than they would have if some of the other coaches had stayed.
Unlike the McCarthy School of Excellence in Green Bay, where it was just the one coach over and over and over. Anyway, Brash.
One more thing on Brash with the point about why the Vikings didn't go for 2 when they scored and made it a 5-point game. I think that's partly because coaches aren't really aggressive, other than maybe Tomlin. So they feel if they go for 2. And it's not really in the 4th quarter. They don't like the idea of chasing points that they lost if they failed that conversion.
Yeah. I certainly can rationale it, but
because you can say the same about the Chargers because of the extra point they missed in the first half for why they probably should have gone for a 2, and
Yeah, it's just weird sometimes because mathematically it didn't make much a hell of a difference, 1 or 2. Yeah, to miss the 1, 2 was way better than 1, and 0 or 1 really was indifferent because you could, like, even on the last try they could have kicked the field goal to even it up. Yeah, at worst had they missed the 1 point or missed a 2-point opportunity earlier by only being up by 4. So and clearly they weren't worried about just being up by 7 because they went for it on 4th and 1. So it's just weird thinking in the same game, in the same quarter. So, yeah, look, there's argument both. I reckon certainly when they kicked the 1 pointer at the start of the 4th quarter, it wasn't anyone's mind. It's certainly Monday morning quarterbacking stuff, yeah. After the fact, you get the calculator out and you start doing the machinations. But at the time, I certainly didn't think twice about it. It was only after the game I thought, geez, if they'd only kicked that, if they'd gone for 2, they could have iced this game and not have to go for it on 4th and 1. Anyway.
That's the beauty of NFL, though, is you can look back on the game and always go, why didn't they do this then? Why didn't they do this then? When, in fact, the NFL is all about what happens at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think that's why we love it so much even when your team's a couple of touchdowns down, you know all you have to do is score once and stop them once and you're back in it, right? But even though you might seriously be getting flogged up and down the field, that's what we love about this game. And because these games, so many are decided by 1 touchdown or less, you can always look back to a point and you say, oh, if only that had happened, yeah? And obviously the later it is in the game, the more obvious it sticks out, that stuff, yeah? So.
Well, we're starting to see coaches get a little bit more aggressive with 4th down calls when they're not in the red zone. It's just because it is that trying to steal that extra possession. If rather than punting, you can go further downfield and try and at least get the field goal.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
Here's a stat for you on that point you just made, Aussie dude. Teams have gone, as at the end of 5 weeks, teams have gone for it on 4th down 188 times this season. 108 of those 188 have been converted. That's the most attempts since 1991, and the conversion rate is the second highest it's ever been. So I'm not sure
what's the yardage though.
The stats don't have that. Yeah, the stats don't. But the one thing that stats do have is that something more than 30% of the fourth down attempts that are being attempted are outside the red zone, which is an all-time record.
And you know what's interesting about that? I reckon if you got the 3rd down conversion percentage, it's probably better than that.
Yeah, I'd agree with it. I don't have it in front of me.
What are those numbers again?
So 188 4th down attempts.
Yep.
This is until the end of the 5th round. 188 attempts, 108 conversions. That's the second highest conversion rate. The only time it's ever been higher was in 2012. And it's far and away the most attempts since 1991.
So that's almost a 58% conversion rate. I don't know if there's a 3rd down conversion rate that good.
I'd suspect 3rd down varies a little bit more team to team.
Be around that.
But I have to look into that. I didn't even think to look that up. But it's really interesting for me because it says generally coaches are being much more aggressive. And as I think Aussie dude, you were just saying, they're also taking that 4th down willingness outside the red zone. It's not that
it's also that on 3rd down plays they don't need to get the whole 10 or whatever. If they're in a 3rd and 10, they just need to get your 6 or 7 and get to a 4th and 3.
And the only other stat in that little summary was that of all of those, of the 188 4th down attempts, 56 have been in the first half, but only 35 have been converted. So the conversion rate when you go for it on 4th down in the first half of a game is only 62%, whereas that's better than the overall conversion rate. So I'm not sure what that says. Maybe it's more of a statement about the quality of the defenses in the league. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I just found it really interesting that considering, because I think 91 was one of the seasons where they had an official strike and also they were still overcoming one of the player strike impact. So there was some pretty weak defenses. So it made sense for them to be really aggressive and have a lot of 4th down attempt. There's not the same reasoning to me that's as obvious this year, but for whatever reason, maybe it's everybody's suddenly got a dose of aggro pills. I don't know.
It's not really 4th down, but on 2-point conversions in the Bills Titans game today, one of the commentators was talking about the types of 2-point conversions, and they're saying that if you run like a draw play, there's like a 76% chance of converting, and they'll go on like, you scramble out, or, you do play action or some kind of motion to try and scheme someone open that way, and it's a lot lower, which I thought was really surprising, because you think 2-point conversions and you're thinking it's more like a short yardage thing, so it's going to be hard to get those yards up the middle, and you're not going to try a draw on 4th and 2 at midfield.
Unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles, but we'll leave that. Sven Shuttlesworth, thank you so much for that input on the game. I promise you we'll leave you alone for the rest of the episode. Fair warning, though, we're going to come back to you in the preview episode for next week. You are playing the Falcons, and we all know what that means. You're going to come from behind and win if you can recover the onside kick. Brash, that game you were talking about, Chargers Saints. How's this for a stat? The Saints were 1-35 since Drew Brees started in 2006, when they'd been behind by 17 points or more. 1-35, and somehow they managed to get over the line against the Chargers. What an amazing comeback, or just really pathetic defense by the Chargers?
I think I don't know. I honestly thought the Saints were just going to get blown away in that game, and I really can't. Even watching the abridged highlights package on Game Pass earlier this morning, I still can't understand how they won that game. I just didn't think they played that well. It's not uncommon. The 1-37. What is it? 1-37, 17 points down.
1-35, win 17 points down.
1-35 is, across the league, I reckon there would be too many teams generally that are 17 points down that will come back and won, right, in general. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that stat. I think this game speaks to what we were just talking about before. There's opportunities to close out a game, and you look back at the game and there's moments here and there, and punters missing, kickers missing, field goals doesn't help. They did everything but win it at the end of the day. The Chargers, I thought they played really well. That Herbert is going to be a good one. It is what it is when at the end of the day. I was a little bit surprised. Like they shut down. Like Kamara had that one great awesome catch on the sideline, but he did not much in the second half at all. So it sort of surprised me that the Saints came back and won that, given Kamara didn't do a lot in the second half, despite that one catch.
I think that game was...
Shuttlesworth, is Justin Herbert the dude, or should we ship Kirk Cousins to San Diego / Los Angeles?
Early signs, it looks like he is. I mean, that early TD to Keenan Allen on the run there, you can argue that the Saints DB didn't do a great job, but that was a hell of a throw. I think if they can keep weapons around him, and namely in regard to the Chargers, weapons healthy around him, it looks like he'll be there for a long time, and he should serve them pretty well. I think in terms of this game, I think a big moment was when, just before the half, when the Saints were able to drive down and Drew was able to punch that TD in, because up until that drive, Drew, he looked like a dude that was done. But I think he got a bit of his mojo back from that drive, and he was a bit of a different QB in the second half.
So, Sven, are you praying that you'll get Herbert in a swap for Cousins?
Absolutely. I'd take him in a heartbeat. The only question would be is Josh Allen Herbert light, or is it the other way around? It's so difficult. It's so difficult to project what is going to happen in the future. But look, he's off to a great start. I'm a big fan, and I'm so frustrated with the Chargers, because the Chargers are the AFC version of the Vikings, in that they find new ways to lose and all that kind of stuff all the time. So I know a few Chargers fans, and I just feel for them. It's that they had the chance to win, hit the bar, and they go on to lose. It's just the way of the NFL. It's not like being a Bills supporter back in the day when they lost all those Super Bowls in a row. So I suppose as a Chargers fan, you've got hope because you've got someone in place, and like I said, I would swap Herbert for Cousins anytime.
And I would also say that I think the Vikings O-line is significantly better than what LA Chargers have got, and yet Herbert's, that hasn't affected him at all. It doesn't seem to have phased him. I think, and it's a shame that Fuey, the quarterback whisperer, is not here to share us with his insights. But we all know that Fuey's a massive fan of Joe Burrows. I got to say, I think Herbert's far outperformed Burrow so far this year. And it'll be interesting to see how the season plays out. A couple of other stats from that Chargers-Saints game. If I asked you guys who was the biggest choking team since 2003, and also who was the biggest choking team this season, we'd all say the Falcons, wouldn't we? That'd be pretty fair to say.
I reckon the Chargers have been in a lot more games because they do seem to just constantly have those heartbreaking losses.
Well, they're the first team, because they lost last week after leading by more than 17 points. They're the first team since 2003 to lose back-to-back games when leading by 17 points or more. And overall, I mean, this has really been the season of the comebacks. A team has rallied from at least 16 points down to win every single week this week. We've had at least one comeback win. So I think that's a pretty amazing. For me, I knew there'd been a few comebacks. I didn't realise that it had happened every single week of the season so far. I mean, is that just COVID and 2020 being the weirdest year in the century, or is it more to do with that? For example, is it more because they're running more on fourth down? I don't know. Shuttlesworth, I mean, have you noticed more comeback wins this year? Sorry, I should say, obviously not more comeback wins by the Vikings, but more comeback wins generally.
Yeah, well, we're still doing our part for entertainment, but I mean, yeah, I think you've noticed more spurts, definitely. And I don't know either, but I guess maybe COVID and lack of one-on-one in the same room video. Dudes are figuring things out more on the spot and adjusting at the time. Yeah, I'm not too sure why.
Fuey's going to be so pissed that he missed this episode of the podcast. Shuttlesworth talked about spurts and video and spurts.
I think you'll find that the defences this year are much less prepared than other seasons because of COVID, and because of that, teams have the ability to get on a roll a lot more than they would have in other seasons. Now, it's early in the season, but the fact that there was no pre-season, no OTAs, all that kind of stuff, just means that the defences are one step behind the offences.
And obviously that's not helped either by the officiating trend in terms of things like pass interference and holding and stuff like that, which also adds against slants against the defenses, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like you made the statement that the Chargers O-line was worse than the Vikings O-line. Far out, that's a big statement. And if we could swap Drew Samir for anyone on the Chargers line, we'll take that. We'll take that trade right now.
I got a couple of people in Philly, I'll tell you. Brash?
I'm talking about the Chargers O-line. I think that is probably how the game turned. Like, the Saints were blitzing pretty heavy, and the Chargers O-line just weren't handling it. Like, they weren't giving Herbert a whole lot, and I think they even mentioned it in the telecast that, he only got sacked like 3 or 4 times, but he was getting hit a fair bit on his dropbacks, and the more you get hit, the more you do start to speed up that internal clock and force throws. I reckon that's just how the game turned, was just the collective hits on Herbert. That I don't think Keenan Allen going out early helped either, because it means he's down his top wide receiver and the top running back's out for 6 weeks, even though that the running back Jackson played pretty good and Mike Williams had just about a career game. But I reckon he gets a proper O-line and he gets, his offensive weapons, and the Chargers could be something pretty scary out west, which is already a fairly scary division other than, the Broncos at the moment. But I just reckon they fix the O-line and that's all they really need. But I mentioned in the thread that if they don't fix the
RG3 or Carson Wentz or unfortunately any one of a number of examples. Hey Brash, you've been telling us all through the year that how much better the Saints are when Michael Thomas plays, and that you thought that was a big reason why Drew Brees had perhaps not performed consistently early in the year. Obviously Thomas didn't play in this game because he chose to get into a bit of an altercation with one of his teammates. Did his abs? Are they getting used to not playing with him?
Well, they've got to win a game every now and again. And in fairness, in fairness, as you know, Herbert, there was a lot of excitement in that game that was end to end, and a closeness of a contest can often disguise the quality of the contest itself. Yeah, San Diego. We're not only down, Allen went out early, and not only that, but they were down. They don't have the greatest offensive line in the first place, and they were down 3 starters, out injured on that offensive line. So 60% of the line were backup. They've got to win a game here and there. New Orleans isn't god-awful horrible, right? Not like another team we're going to talk about in a little bit. But Breeze won before Thomas was there, so I'm sure he probably had a bit of a renaissance night, I guess.
Helped that his defense helped him out too a little bit.
I'll just stick to what I said a little bit earlier. I watched the game, most of it live as it was happening, and then I watched the highlights package on Game Pass again the next morning, and I still can't believe they won it. I just didn't think they played that well.
No, it was
trade Thomas while he still has high value, or
this is Breeze's last year. Probably you'd start to be wondering about what the Saints are actually setting up for this year, because I think at the start of the year everybody probably thought, they'll win the South. Tampa, not really. Especially after week 1 with the way Brady looked, week 2 for that matter, how Brady looked. No one expected Carolina to actually be a better football team since McCaffrey's been injured. McCaffrey's injury is going to be a godsend to the Panthers, because they've learned now to be a balanced offense without him there. Now when he comes back in, they're going to be a good football team. And I've always been a fan of Bridgewater. He's never going to be a superstar, but he's not going to cost you a lot of games either. So the Saints are thinking, well, maybe we're not going to get the South, right? Maybe we're not, and we're dropping games. Okay, we won yesterday, but we're dropping games, and we're not going to get the easy run into the South that we probably thought we'd get in the preseason. This is probably, you would think, Breeze's last year. Maybe they should trade Thomas. I don't know.
If they do that, Brash, who will Taysom Hill throw the ball to? The greatest quarterback in history will have no one to throw the ball to.
I have no doubt that the Saints will probably draft a quarterback in the offseason.
Oh, so it's not the Taysom Hill succession plan.
Well,
you
could put Taysom Hill in for 1 year at $8 million, and his contract's not guaranteed beyond 2021, I don't think. And you get a rookie, and there's a few reasonable quarterbacks in this draft.
Be a bit like Ben Rutten taking over at Essendon. Yeah. Real long term.
Mate, I'm already seeing if I can remanufacture GAROPPOLO into LAWRENCE.
It's got almost the same number of letters. They're just not quite the right letters. But if you turn them upside down and
there's no W. W's got to be my killer, I think.
You just trim the bubbles off the P's and line the bits up, and a little bit of white out and a little
So anyway,
for me, I wouldn't mind talking next about that game that you briefly mentioned, that Brash just briefly mentioned. Sven, what do you think of the Dan Quinn farewell game, and what an angry small man Mike Davis is? What a phenomenal running back he is. Where's he been? He's the McCaffrey replacement that's outshining McCaffrey.
Look, it's all about matchups every week, isn't it? So these players will come in and out depending on the defenses they're playing. But I think, look, the situation at the Falcons is dire, right? We all know that. So, you just move on from that situation. And, of course, the Vikings play the Falcons next week, and the Falcons get a new coach. So we can't pencil that one in as a win. Now, as Brash said, I also am a big Bridgewater fan. I would rather he was still on the Vikings team, but that's another story for plenty of beers some other occasion. But look, I think the NFC South. Well, who would you pick? Who would you pick as the division winner in the NFC South? Like it could be one of those last person standing situations. So I do think the Buccaneers will probably end up over 500. The Panthers look like they're going to end up over 500. And assuming Thomas comes back, you would assume New Orleans is going to finish over 500. So is it going to be 3 teams, 9 and 7, or what do you think?
I think I definitely agree with you on Tampa Bay and Carolina. I think both of them are heading towards 500. But just as you were talking, then I was trying to think: have any of these teams played each other yet interdivisional?
No, but I believe
just week 1, the Bucks Saints.
Bucks Saints. That's it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I believe both the NFC East and the NFC South are the only divisions where there's only been one divisional game up until this week.
NFC West as well, mate.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, and of course, sorry, the Cowboys-Giants played in week 5, so that's straight what I said about the NFC East. That's not
NFC
right.
West. So you got divisions you got divisions that are ultimately going to be decided by the interdivisional games. And I've always enjoyed watching NFC South matchup games for some reason.
Yeah, you often mention that.
There's always They're very rarely 10-9 or shitty scores like that. They're end to end. They're not. None of the teams are perfect, so they don't bore you to death by winning, right? They'll make enough mistakes that it keeps it interesting watching the game, especially as a neutral fan. So I reckon this division is probably, arguably, the most open division of all the divisions in the whole league.
Shuttlesworth, your view of both Bridgewater and Davis? And also, are you suddenly scared of the Falcons now they're going to have a new coach?
Actually, just before he does that, let me speak on Davis. So, Davis was drafted by the 49ers in 2015. He was handpicked by Kyle Shanahan in the Lynch-Shanahan first year of tenure. And because the Shanahans have such a reputation around running backs, for him to demand, because apparently the story goes Davis was not even on Lynch's big board. But Shanahan convinced him to trade up and get him, I think, in the 4th round or something like that. The guy was just a lazy pig for 2 years with us. Didn't do a thing. And then I think went to Seattle for a year and a half, went to the Bears, did nothing there. And now all of a sudden he's had a breakout game. But it's taken him 5 years to do it when it's all said and done. So maybe he's a late bloomer.
One-hit wonder, I think, is Brash's insta verdict.
No. He might have finally grown up because he had all for Shanahan to take to make. I remember at the time the deal about him taking this guy, and they thought, well, Shanahan knows running back, but he was just a lazy pig for us for 2 years. He was in and out of. I think he got cut by Seattle 3-4 times. Did bugger all in Chicago, and now he's broken out. Maybe he's finally got it. Maybe he's finally realised he's grown up to be an NFL footballer.
Mate, he's 5'7" and 1/8 of an inch. He's not growing up. Perhaps I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. He certainly seems, and I don't mean this in a nasty way, but he seems very angry, and that can be good and bad. I believe I was about to ask Shuttlesworth what you thought about Mr. Bridgewater, and I guess whether you're scared of the Falcons.
Like I imagine most Vikings fans are, I'm very happy to see Teddy getting a go again and doing well. I think, as was mentioned before, he's just a good, honest footballer. He'll give you what you need, minimal mistakes. I will admit, a few times there where I saw him trying to juke a few people, I flinched a little bit. It was like that one against the Chargers at home where he did the same thing and his legs gave out. But yeah, happy to see him doing well. The other thing that stood out with me is another Jets failure and Robbie Anderson and taking that weapon, or letting that weapon go from Darnold and Bridgewater, showing you that he continues to be good.
Yep.
So in terms of, I guess, the other games, for me, the one that was a bit of a surprise was to see just how good old Uncle Romeo got the Texans going against the Jaguars. Interesting stat from that one too. I believe the Jaguars, at least on my stat, are the first team in NFL history to lose 3 consecutive games to winless teams. And they're not having a good season.
Well, no one expected the Jags to be good this year. Yeah, maybe it was a false dawn when they beat the Colts in week one. And they're playing as per expectations since then.
I think the Texans they opened with the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Steelers, Vikings. I don't think 0-4 blew anyone away. And it just so happened they got their turn to play a worse team this week.
Yeah.
So you're saying that Bill O'Brien never should have been sacked, really? Because
he didn't have to burn the place down, but he could have tried a bit harder. But yeah, they had a pretty horror start to the year in terms of their schedule.
Yeah.
So who got sacked first? Did Bill O'Brien sack himself as general manager and then sack the coach, or was it the?
I just hope he did do it in front of a mirror.
Staring into that hole in his chin.
David Johnson. David Johnson's been a little bit of a bright spot out of a terrible trade that you're never going to win. It's good to see that there's the glimpses of the old David Johnson still there.
Isn't he getting like 2 yards a carry though?
It was better than what he was getting before. It has been a bit of a year of redemption, and a number of players that have done surprisingly well, I guess you'd say. Aldon Smith is probably the one at the Cowboys that's gotten it, but Raheem Mostert at the 49ers, and then a number of other players that have, and Mike Davis is another one that we've talked about already. So yeah.
Sorry, you're saying Raheem Mostert is having a redemption year?
Sorry, Jerick McKinnon. Got my names mixed up. Sorry.
I'm about to say the 49ers got on Mossert's back in the playoffs last year, mate. What else do you want the guy to do? He's only been injured all this year.
He hasn't been hooked yet, unlike quarterbacks. No, sorry, I got my M-based running backs confused. Hey, it's hard when you're trying to run a podcast. I get names confused. Blackie.
I think the Texans.
Sorry, Brasher.
I think the Texans also looked better because O'Brien had just lost the locker room. I think he'd lost the locker room before, before the season. One of the shows had a replay of an interview JJ Watt did, and he was just fidgeting and nervous, trying to dodge the question about what Bill O'Brien's like as a coach. He was just saying, he's there to be a good leader and just trying all these cliches and stuff. And then apparently on Twitter or Instagram, he posted a picture the day after he got sacked that sun shining through NRG Stadium. Just passive aggressive stuff that you've never seen from JJ Watt.
Yeah.
And apparently he went on a full on tirade against him a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and apparently 10 minutes after the game he said it's good to have fun again. He tweeted, good to have fun again. So I think that's pretty clear how that locker room was behaving under Bob.
Hey Sven, Deshaun Watson, you think he can turn him around really quickly in Texas? Obviously he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore to throw to, thanks to the general manager's outstanding management, but still got a few talented weapons there.
I think the situation at the Texans is that they still have Deshaun Watson on the team, so they can play the long game because they've got their quarterback sorted. So it doesn't really matter how long, whether or not it takes a season or 2 seasons, maybe 3, is you've still got Deshaun Watson as your QB. So, the trend for the Texans has to be on the way up. And, the team will just be looking this year at what have they got, what do they need. Now, they've got no draft picks going forward, so you just, okay, what are we, where are we at? Bill O'Brien has sort of put them in hell for a number of seasons, and as far as the draft is concerned, but I wouldn't be too worried from the Texans' perspective, and they'll work it out eventually.
I'd be pretty worried because they're 15 mil over the cap as well, so no draft picks and no cap room. They can't bring anyone in.
And you'd question the quality of general manager and head coach you'd get with that lack of collateral at your disposal. So you become in GM, you come into GM and you basically you mail in draft day, and the coach is going, well, I don't know if any of this stuff here is what I want. If I were them, although I suppose one thing they could do is go the total opposite direction and have a fire sale.
Oh, Deshaun Watson to the Patriots. I mean, JJ Watt, a bit like Tom Brady to the Buccaneers. JJ Watt will still get you some value. He's not a great player anymore, but
There's quality on
rounders?
that team. There is quality on that team. Make no mistake about that. But I think it's not so much about how they would perform as a team as what the personnel, like who would want to go in there. Like if you're the boss, you're making your team and you've got no collateral to work with.
It's a very specific job opening that only appeals to someone that wants to be known as the guy that took Mission Impossible and delivered, and is quite happy to accept the fact he's got a 97.99% chance of failing miserably.
Yeah, or you accept that this is as good as it gets as a roster, and there's that old saying in the NFL: if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. That if a GM comes in, he's basically a placeholder for 2 years, before he can do anything realistically on the field, before you see anything demonstrable. He's got to wait till the 2022 draft and off season before he can do anything. Or you say, we're going to pull it down and start again, then that would be an exciting job.
Yeah, and the question is,
you'd be wheeling and dealing,
obviously you'd retain Watson if you could and trade away just about everything else. And anyway, it'd be interesting to see what happens. But my own view, as I said last week on the podcast, I really struggle to see how they're going to get anybody of quality who's going to want to come in and coach. And I wonder, I mean, we've seen this in the AFL too, with a couple of teams basically appoint, the old Justin Lepich model where you appoint somebody as basically a seat warmer until you can get your hands on the coach you really want in 2 or 3 years. I wonder if somebody like a Romeo Crennel for a year or two, not to take him to the Super Bowl, but to just keep them together and look after Watson's mental health and keep the young guys in a winning mindset.
So he could keep breaking his own record every week as being the oldest head coach in the competition. The issue they're going to have as well is there's one other vacancy already, and there could be another couple at least. Yeah, Gay's probably gone. Who knows what happens in New York, with both teams. So there might be competition for the best candidate as well.
Oh God, yeah, no doubt about that.
And all those teams will probably be in roughly the same spot. Atlanta's probably not far different situation. I don't know what their salary cap looks like.
They got more cap space, but that's about it. They got picks and they got cap space, but
so that'd probably be a more attractive place to go. But you'll probably be looking. If you had Atlanta and Houston, everything else being equal, you'd take Atlanta over Houston.
Actually, looking at the cap, 40 mil over almost for the Falcons next year.
The Falcons are okay, so they're not.
Like 20. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and that
25 over. Yeah.
But a big chunk of that's Matt Ryan, and if they trade a Matt Ryan to somebody like the Patriots, all of a sudden they don't have a cap problem for next year. But the flip side is the problem is you trade Matt Ryan away, or even if you keep him, if you're the new coach, who's your quarterback in 3 years? It ain't going to be Matt Ryan. Whereas if you take the job in Texas, the job in Texas, you got Deshaun Watson.
Mate, they're up to their necks in the Lawrence sweepstakes, mate. Right now,
it's Falcons and the 2 New York teams.
And the 2, mate, they're up to their necks in that. And don't underwrite this field as a quarterback, mate. He's a gun. This will be a good quarterback class this year. And so if you're in the market for one, you've got to get one.
You've just mentioned 3 teams, not one of which are the NFC East, and I'm stunned by that because let me tell you, there'll be at least 2 NFC East teams.
I thought the Giants played in your division. Is it that bad that you're even culling teams in your own division now?
No, I thought you said the Jets, but yeah. From my sense of it, I think there's another team called the 49ers that might be pretty close to the bottom of the pecking order. But anyway,
already discussed and answered. Can we move on?
Yeah, by you, I've got 3 other members of the panel that haven't had a say yet.
I want to talk about Brian Allen. Who the fuck is Brian Allen? That's who I want to talk about.
Well, all right, go ahead.
No, it doesn't matter. I've already...
No, go ahead. Isn't he Carl Allen's brother?
No. Brian Allen was a cornerback the 49ers brought in because 5 of their top 6 quarterbacks are all out injured at the moment, who was on the practice squad during the week and then started. And not only did they start him, but they left him on an island.
He was picked on and picked on and picked on.
Fitzpatrick had a perfect passer rating throwing to his direction. So I think he gave up like 200 yards and he only played for like a quarter and a half.
Yeah, I mean, we talked before.
I think that's called the Tom Capers.
Just Anyway, less said.
We talked before in the context of the Vikings game about their young cornerback that was left isolated. There was even an example in the Eagles-Steelers game. Chase Claypool had scored 3 touchdowns already, so they went and sent a linebacker to try to guard him, and that was an abysmal failure too. So I don't think it was unique. The 49ers and the Vikings are in a very similar situation in terms of their defensive injuries, I think. You're right. I thought he didn't get a lot of support, and as Aussie Dude mentions, maybe it's Dom Capers. Vic Fangio's still the defensive coordinator. Maybe he sends somebody over to help out, and it's not such a bloodbath. But I think in the week we introduce, and Sven and Shuttleworth, I'm particularly looking to you guys as the guests for this week. But the week we introduce the honorary Steve DeBerg Award, I'm really disappointed that Fitzmagic hasn't had more of a plaudits from the panel already this week. I think he's an outstanding candidate for the Steve DeBerg Award. Just keeps on keeping on.
I would agree with you there, and the NFL is all about mismatches, and it doesn't take an offensive genius to work out that the whatever it is, 7th string cornerback may be overrated or overmanned.
Matched.
That's overmatched, and that maybe you should take advantage of that matchup in the game, right? And that is the trouble we've got in this current environment, is that defenses become quite thin from a personnel perspective, and offenses will always pick on the weak link in the defense because they're easy yards. And it's just the way the NFL works. It's nothing against the 49ers. I'm sure they tried some kind of scheme to make it not so bad, but when you just don't have personnel, there's nothing really much you can do.
You can't. You can't. And it was I fortunately had to work on Monday, so I didn't turn the TV on until I knew the scores as they were going, and I'm thinking, who the fuck is this Allen guy? And for me, we talk about moments, and even though at the end it was a belting in the end of the day, there was still one moment in the game when I thought, when I watched the replay, I thought, well, there it is there. Like the Dolphins were first and goal, then there was a false start penalty or a hold or something, then a sack. Anyway, they ended up third and goal on their own, on the 23. So you think, okay, stop them here, kick a field goal, and you're still only 2 scores down. And all Fitzpatrick didn't even look, just threw it up straight at this Allen guy, touchdown. It's all over. Then all of a sudden you're 3 scores down, the game's finished. So I don't know what. All I could think of when I watched the replay was that wasn't Kyle Shanahan under the mask. It was Jim Tomsula. That's all I could think that happened. Because the 49ers I haven't seen them play that badly, that disinterested since Jim Tomsula was head coach. I've not seen anything like it. The offensive line has regressed. It's probably I can't believe how bad that offensive line is. Williams is supposed to be this all-world left tackle. He's giving up 2 sacks a week, no problem. It's just horrific.
What's that Mike I can't even say his name.
Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle, who we drafted in the first round 2 years ago, played really well last year, is absolutely a turnstile in pass protection at the moment, and he's regressed. They've all. So I could accept a lot of stuff that happened with the injuries, but I won't accept the one unit that is basically, other than Richburg, who's been out for it since we signed him basically 2 years ago. The entire offensive line is probably the healthiest. They're the only ones that's pulling out their training camp anointed starters every week. And they're playing horrifically.
Yeah, the Eagles made them look real bad, and the Eagles defensive
horrible.
line.
They were horrible, and they weren't that great against the 2 New York teams when they went over there. They just they were average against Arizona. But even though we were 2-2, dropping the game week 1 against Arizona, we had our chances to win. Dropping the game last week, Philadelphia had our chances to win. Yes, that game on the weekend was just horrible. There was nothing. It's almost like they disinterested now, right?
Last question for you, Brash, on that game, because I want to end the pain. I don't want to put you through any more than I've forced Sven and Shuttlesworth to sit through. But was it a little bit of 2020 hindsight commentary when Shanahan said that Garoppolo was injured and that's why he took him off? If he was injured, why did he start him?
Because they were talking about all week. Because and this is where if Shanahan has a weakness. And it goes back to when the Falcons lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots. It's that he gets a bit stubborn in his ways. And he has a certain way that he wants quarterbacks to play. He doesn't rate mobile quarterbacks. He wants guys to play to his system. If you remember, when he was the offensive coordinator at Washington, and Washington took RG3, he threw a hissy fit because he wanted it, and they drafted Cousins eventually, remember, in the same draft. So if there's one knock on Shanahan is that he is pig-headed with the way he expects quarterbacks to play. He's been all through, not just this year, all through last year. He wasn't going to cut Beathard or Mullins because he said they are NFL quality starters, right? And said, and even when teams offering 5th and 6th round picks for them, he still wasn't interested, right? He wants 2nd and 3rd round picks, right? So he's pig-headed about it. The story goes he's still in love with Cousins. He's not, it was the Lynch deal that got Garoppolo, and he came around to the idea of Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo's playing injured against that offensive line. I've seen this before with him. He has these games where he's just horrible, right? And I've said it before. I've said it on the podcast. I've said it in the Mustangs. There are these games he just pulls out where he's horrible, and that was one of them. So
Sven, you heard it here first, mate. Big opportunity for the Vikings. Trade Cousins to Shanahan. He'll take calls, I believe.
That is already being discussed in the Minnesota press. I can assure you of that. Because the Cousins contract is so bad.
Yeah.
He's guaranteed $30+ million next year, and on the third day of the league year next year, he's $45 million in 2022 is guaranteed.
Yeah.
So
that's Sam Bradford level money,
Oh yeah. He's winning. He's winning at the game of how to make lots of money.
Without doing too much of anything.
He's a 500 quarterback. Cousin.
Yeah.
And he will beat bad teams. You can guarantee he'll lose to good teams, and the ones in the middle are 50-50. So put it this way, if we'd even take an injured Garoppolo for Cousins, I can tell you that. And,
the interesting thing, we're 2+2 with them, and there's always been this undercurrent thing with Cousins and Garoppolo, right? With Shanahan. Here's where 2 and 2 comes to 5. The 49ers can cut Garoppolo this year with no dead money, because the 49ers are really smart with the way they structure contracts. So basically, if you play well, we'll keep paying it, right? And if they front-loaded the contract with his signing bonus, have absorbed all of the dead money up front, so they can literally cut him for nothing at the end of this year.
I'm looking at the contract right now, and I'm very, very jealous. Have a look at the Cousins contract sometime.
Yeah, the 49ers are very good with their contracts. They manage, even I remember back to the Kaepernick contract and all the rest of it. They look good in the press, but when you look at them, they're essentially annualized contracts, with team options and all sorts of stuff. So
I'd completely agree with you on player contract. I think and it sounds like they've learned their lesson with Shanahan's contract, but their approach to coach contracts perhaps was not quite so supreme, because in Shanahan's first year, I believe they were paying Harbaugh, Chip Kelly, and Tom Siller.
That's right.
Not to coach. So they're one of those weird franchises where they do it for the player contracts. They screw the players down there for every cent. But when it comes to a coach, please, sir, come in the door.
No, I don't think they so much screw them. They just make
I didn't mean they were unfair. I meant that they make it competitive. They don't do dumb contracts.
We're definitely spending all our salary cap, but the coaching carousel you talk about is all on the former GM Balky.
Yeah,
right? 100% on him.
Yeah.
Right? He is the.
He was abysmal.
He's the man who has the smoking gun in his hand for all that.
And I think arguably he's the worst general manager that the NFL's seen, with the one that was just sacked in Atlanta, a close second, followed by Bill O'Brien.
He won GM of the year.
Bizarre.
Right?
Bizarre.
When the 49ers went to the NFC Championship game in 2011.
Yeah.
2011 and lost to the Giants.
I mean, to be fair, everybody thought Harbaugh and Kaepernick and company were on a surge, but I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now with the benefit of hindsight. So let's move on. There's probably another game. Shuttlesworth, I might come to you with this one. Tell us if you didn't watch it, and I can just pretend your name is Fuey. We had American Crow on last week, and he was very much up and about because they'd won 3 in a row. Oh my God, they won again! Is the world ending? The Browns are 4-1. We've had football on a Wednesday in Australia, and Gladys Bjelkian has a boyfriend. What the hell's going on with the world?
I think, they're actually looking like, when you read that team on paper, the performances, especially this week, it's starting to look like it should. And it's probably maybe what might happen with Houston, and maybe if the Jets pull the trigger, it looks like it's a team that's actually having fun again. And there's a few fresh ideas, and players are in roles that they like. OBJ's confidence is up. He's having fun. Baker looks confident as well, and he's hitting some throws. So I'm not sure the world's ending. I think maybe just a few little tweaks here for what was a roster full of skill, and maybe it's coming together a bit.
Aussie dude, do they need to get Johnny Football back as the backup quarterback?
Don't think we need to put Brown fans through that again, but you look at it, and American Crow's probably still trying to figure everything out about that game. They only ran for like 120 yards, and Baker threw like 35 times, and they managed to win. Normally when that happens, they're down by a fair bit. It's just maybe they were lucky Phillip Rivers was on the other side.
I got to say, for me, that game, the big take out of that, Sven, I thought, was how disinterested Phillip Rivers looked after he was called for intentional grounding. Oh my God, did he have a dummy spit about that call? And the whole rest of the game, he was walking around like an 8-year-old who didn't get his toy from mummy. Am I too harsh on Mr. Rivers?
Oh no, I don't think so. The Chargers let him go for a reason. They think he's at the end of the road. I tend to agree that he'll win some games. He'll still win some games, but I can't see the Colts being significant this year. Put it that way. Like they can beat the Vikings, but everyone can beat the Vikings. So. The thing that of course, the Browns have the Vikings link in that Stefanski is coaching them, and I do find it very amusing with the comments of just keep running the ball every week from our good mate in the States, and I think they're on the right track, and it just goes to show that if you can get a competent coach in charge of your team, you've got a chance. And to be honest, the number of competent coaches in the NFL is a lot smaller than people would think, in that of the 32 teams, there's probably somewhere between 10 and 15 coaches that really aren't earning their money. And if you get a good coach, you just got to hang on to them for all money. And, Cleveland are just, bearing fruit because they've finally got themselves a decent coach.
Brash, what did you think?
I didn't watch this game, mate, so I can't add a lot.
You missed the Phillip Rivers intentional. If there's one highlight you want to watch, and it is in the little 3-minute highlight package, it's the intentional grounding. It was the first intentional grounding call against Phillip Rivers in 11 years. And his reaction made it sound like the first time that he'd ever been told not to stay up at night. His dummy spit was awesome, and it was still going on the sidelines 5 minutes after the call.
As good as Tom Brady's dummy spit at his offensive line?
Far better. Far better.
Man, I'll go Google it now.
It's worth watching. If you can find the timestamp, it's worth watching, not just the actual immediate reaction, but Rivers on the sidelines. They kept cutting to him during the next 5 minutes of the game, and he was going off. It was outstanding. And sorry, just as background for our 2 podcast listeners, for those that don't know, Philip Rivers is probably the poster child for the person that as soon as he gets under pressure, just randomly heaves the ball in no particular direction where there's a receiver, and never ever, much like Brady, never ever gets penalised for it. So God, it was gorgeous to see him finally get penalised. And probably, Aussie dude, probably from my point of view, the surprising thing for that was that I think the Colts had developed a bit of a reputation as defensively a really strong defense. I thought they were pretty weak this game.
Look, I'm high on the Colts in just about everywhere other than QB. I reckon that they maybe did even try Brissett again, because I like their running game. I love their draft from last year with Taylor and the wide receiver at USC. I've forgotten his name, but he was one of my draft crushes. And look, I think that they're still a bit of a work in progress on defense. They're slowly trying to build it up. They've just about finished, well, they probably have finished in the last few years, solidifying their offensive line, which probably makes quite a few teams jealous, especially your Vikings and Miners fans at the moment. But like if you have a really strong offensive line and you have a good running back like Taylor, I don't know why they didn't run him more on the Browns. Like even looking at the box score, he was getting just under 5 yards a carry, and they only gave it to him 12 times. I know the Browns have a really strong, front seven, so they can be tough to run against. But I mean, Rivers really is not what the Colts probably thought he still was, and I mean, you just need to probably lean more on the running game like they were a few years ago when Doyle came out and as a rookie and was really good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was surprised. I know Marlon Mack, of course, got injured, so that changed their plans at running back. But I was really surprised because I thought Taylor was very productive, and like you say, as an Eagles fan, it was almost like the early years of the Andy Reid era in Philly. The coaching was just completely pass heavy. Now I don't know. Part of me thinks that's Philip Rivers changing the calls at the offensive at the line of scrimmage. If it wasn't Rivers changing the calls, then the offensive coordinator needs to get a lot of heat for that because it was pretty piss poor, to be frank.
I just think defensively, I don't think you can undersell the Colts not having Darius Leonard there. Particularly with Jarvis bobbing up for, I mean, he only caught 4, but it was for 88, and just about all of them in the middle of the field. You can only wonder if Leonard was in there leading the defense as he does, whether that would have been quite as productive for the Browns.
Although I've got to say, Jarvis Landry really let me down. I started him in one of my fantasy teams looking for him to be throwing for 3 touchdowns. He didn't throw for any, what's up with that shit? All right. We've been avoiding it, but it's time to talk about the 8th best division in football. We might start with the football team against the Rams. Well, there's not really much to talk about there, is there? Except, and Brash, I'll throw to you on this because I know it's a bit of a thing you've been waiting for a while. Alex Smith back on a football field. How good was that to see?
That was awesome to see, but clearly Ron Rivera doesn't have any sense of humanity to put him out there after literally getting his leg chewed up in a wood chipper, and you put him out there and you let him get sacked 6 times. Like seriously? And Allen was cleared to come back, and you left Smith out there, and he
against Aaron Donald.
Donald was sitting. I saw a clip where Aaron Donald is sitting on the bench saying, "Geez, his legs are strong." Talking about Alex Smith's recovery, that he was actually standing up and still getting, like not going down easily. He was still being Alex Smith, who, as people know, I'm a unashamed Alex Smith fan, always have been. I just think he's never got to a point where he could have had the same career as Rodgers, in my view. But to leave him out there, sacked 6 times. I think his stat line for passing was he threw for 37 yards, but after the sack numbers, it was like 6 yards net. Yeah, I just couldn't believe they left him out there against.
It was
Don.
almost verging on malpractice or a lawsuit or whatever.
Well, especially with Allen being healthy and go back in. Yeah.
I mean, for that matter, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Dwayne Haskins also technically healthy and fit to play?
I don't know.
He wasn't there, though.
He
wasn't dressed.
No.
Oh, okay. They left. Yeah. All right.
So it was good that they took Smith out there, and you could tell he was.
It's got to do wonders for his confidence, doesn't it? I mean,
smashed 6 times. But it speaks volumes for the guy. Not once did he go down. Like just come. He still was always trying to win the game for his team. So I just couldn't believe 6 sacks. When did he come in? And that's in less than half of football, or not much. Yeah. Anyway,
that game takes place in December, and he's probably in hospital again because of that field at the end of the year.
Yep, when it's wet, and exactly.
FedEx is by far the worst turf in the league, and it's been that way for
forever.
At least 10 years.
I think once they put the heating under Lambeau, it became the worst. Absolutely the worst playing surface in the league.
I think I would argue that I think the New York surface is worse just this year, but I think that's a specific structural failure which we saw when the 49ers played there. And in previous years it's actually been a pretty good surface. I think they just had a particular screw up this off season. Sven, did you get a chance to watch that game? And if you did, is Jared Goff the real deal?
No, I didn't watch the game. So I can't really comment on it, but honestly, I'm looking at the box score here. It's just, how bad are Washington? We only manage 38 yards rushing and 111 yards passing. It's like something from the 40s. Now, I'd like to know what the time of possession was and things like that too. But yeah, it looks like the Rams are a good team, and they always have been a good team. And they had the lull after the Super Bowl, a little bit like what the 49ers are having this year, and they're on the way back. So Jared Goff, I think he's the kind of quarterback you want to keep on your team. Is he a Super Bowl winner? I don't know. It's hard to say, but there's plenty of teams in a lot worse quarterback situation than the Rams, that's for sure.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. I would have said, we just had the stat posted in the chat, and Washington, if I read that correctly, the football team, that sounds really weird when you're talking about stats and you say the football team. Washington had the ball for 25 minutes. I'm stunned by that stat. If you'd asked me, I would have said maybe 17 for the game, because they looked like they were being...
5 minutes for Alex Smith just to pick himself up and find his mouth guard half a dozen times, so there's 5 minutes gone.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you could argue that 6 sacks, that chews up a couple of minutes.
5 minutes almost.
Yeah, that's right. So, I don't think the offense was firing. Put it that way.
Wow, I just pulled up a time of possession stat. Oh my God! And I'm sorry, I promised I wouldn't rub your noses in it anymore. But guess which team had the least time of possession?
49ers.
Nope, they were the second least. Yep, 20 minutes they had the ball for. 20 minutes and 32 seconds.
Seahawks.
That makes sense. You think of the first half, the Vikings had like that
the whole
9-minute scoring drive, and they had another couple of long ones.
Sorry, guys, I promised I wouldn't rub your noses in it, but that just blows me away. Anyway,
but when you got the quarterback who throws the best long ball in the league, that's going to happen.
That's very true. Actually,
right? He's going to have 50-second drives.
Let me just resort that for the season. That's interesting. Seattle are actually only averaging 28 minutes time of possession, which is less than Jacksonville, less than Denver, less than San Francisco, less than Chicago, less than Cincinnati, 10 minutes less than Cincinnati. So there's some not very good teams that really possess the ball quite a lot. Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. And like you say, I guess it makes sense when you think about it. It's all to do with Wilson's passing game on offense, isn't it?
Yeah, but would you argue though that that kind of time of possession deficiency will just catch up with them in the end on the defensive side?
Yep.
Just end up getting run into the ground.
At what point? And I mean, Sven, I'd pitch it two ways. I actually reckon there's two parts to that question. The offensive line can't keep running at that pace, but more fundamentally, at some point Wilson gets hit. At some point, that frenetic passing has to come under pressure, and he has to get hit at some point. And he's very lucky, in my view, that he very rarely gets hit. But as opposed to, Brash was talking about Alex Smith getting smashed 6 times in about 3 minutes. I'm not sure. There's no doubt at all. Even a Kirk Cousins has proven he can stand up to being sacked a few times. I'm not sure that Wilson's proven he can put up with that kind of a beating. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just my anti-Pete Carroll flavor. But I'm not convinced that if they do it all season, I'm not sure Wilson can keep it up.
Yeah, look, I think, NFL is all about how consistent can the team be across the season. And there's a number of outliers in the NFC that you just go, what they're doing is just not sustainable for the season. And, you only got to look at Seattle 5-0 and Chicago 4-1, that they're just not sustainable over the season. Now, I'm not saying they won't win their division, but Chicago definitely won't win the division, but it's just not a sustainable way to play NFL, the way that Seattle are playing.
Yep, and if you go back 12 months ago, I think everyone pretty well had Russell Wilson as MVP of the season last year too, at this point of the year. Doing exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. They weren't winning. I think what they've allowed him to do is air it out more because Metcalf is so good. He just throws those pure deep balls. But I don't think it's sustainable. I 100% agree. I think someone will tattoo him. But then again, I've been saying that for 10 years and no one has yet. So
to be fair, this is the first Seahawks team in history that's 5-0 at the beginning of a year. There's never been. They were 4-0 in 2013, but they've never won 5 to start a year until this year. So I'm not convinced that they know themselves can sustain it because they never have had this sort of a start before.
And they've never been this sort of team before either.
Well, looking at it, they're giving up 470 yards a game on defense.
Yep.
But even looking at time of possession, and that can be skewed if you look at Wilson's passing charts, because a lot of them are to the sidelines beyond the numbers. So
which makes the clock stop, obviously. So
yeah. Although it only stops inside 5 minutes, or is it keeps going in 5 minutes, or one of them. But you do save a lot of time if you do get out of bounds in that that final 5 minutes of the half. But he also has the best deep
flip side
in the league.
The flip side is that your defense is out there on the field for how many minutes a game, and and they're certainly not the Legion of Boom anymore. And can they really keep that level of effort up on the defensive side?
They wouldn't want too many more games like the last one. I mean, Cook and Madison and Boone a couple of times really did work them over for some long drives. So a few more games like that, and you'll start to drop off a bit of thing. But the conversation with Wilson's been going on for years, and how they've neglected the offensive line, and really they have just been lucky, because as we've seen with some other QBs, it only takes one good hit and he's a totally different player. So they're running the gauntlet for years without protecting him. So it's either a time bomb or he's the luckiest guy. So
or what they do is you get teams that try and we will mitigate the risk of our quarterback getting hurt, but then still not being good enough to do it. So your quarterback is in a position where they're going to get hurt, right, because of failure of the system. Whereas Seahawks system, as I've always joked about, is to let Wilson run around like a farmyard chalk and never rely on his offensive line to block. Right, so we always say the worst injuries are the ones you don't see coming. And if he's running around, he knows where they're coming from. Right, he's happy to run 20, 25 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Yeah, whereas if you're standing in the pocket and get blindsided, you're more likely to get that bad injury.
Well, less mobile, but same in terms of allowed to improvise. And Aaron Rodgers, and we've seen a couple of times when he's thought, he's safe and whatnot, and being landed on the wrong way or landed the wrong way, and he's done for the year. So it's the same kind of thing. If he loses a little bit of that mobility, it turns it on its head.
I knew I could count on one of the Vikings fans to find a shot at Rodgers. I just knew it.
But Aaron Rodgers walks into a bar, Jack, so...
I will say that I think that the other thing, and I tried to point it out before, and it's fair to say Brash paid out on me for it, but I do think the other key, if you're going to run that game plan where you don't possess the ball for very much time, the other thing you have to have is a punter that is going to absolutely get you field position advantage when you don't convert your first downs. And they've got that in Michael Dixon. And I think he's such a key component of the Seahawks being able to succeed. There's probably three components to them being able to succeed. One is the defense being able to stay out there for as long as. The second thing is Wilson, as we've all said, Wilson not getting smashed or tattooed. But the third thing, which they don't get very much credit for, is just having an exceptional punt coverage game. They're the only team to down punts at the rate that they do inside the 10-yard line. And that's not an accident, in my view. That's a combination of great coaching and some really good skills on Dixon's part. But that's it. I'll end my rant there. Aussie Dude, I think you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just saying, we've seen Russell Wilson get hit, quite a few times in big games. I think a couple of times even against the Niners, where it's just kind of even lit him up even more, and he's just gone supernova and just changed the whole game. So he doesn't, when he does get hit, he doesn't tend to go into a shell. He seems to quite often take it as something to push him up a bit more.
Sven, we're going to stick with the eighth best division in football. And we might pick up on Brash's point and Shuttlesworth's point about the injuries that you don't see coming. That injury to Dak in the Giants-Cowboys game was obviously a major turning point in his career, potentially, whether he gets retained by the Cowboys or they let him go. Did you think that they would win once he went down?
Yeah, look, they were against the Giants, so I think the Cowboys were always going to win that game. It was just a question of how the Giants worked out how to lose the game. And look, you obviously hate people going down with injury and things like that, but I think the Cowboys, they have to be favourite to win the division. Who the hell else is going to win that division? I say that knowing that you're an Eagles fan, but the Cowboys have to be the most complete team in the NFC least. And I never had any doubt that the Giants would find a way to lose that game, because I think their strategy for this season is fairly well known.
Yeah, the reason Blacky's not on the podcast is he knows if he bloody showed up, I'd be asking him about his love for Danny Dimes, who I've never trusted and I think has regressed dramatically just in the last 3 weeks. But I got to give him credit. The Giants were in front. Brash, were the Giants in front because Danny Dimes is good, or were they in front because the Cowboys' defense is that shitful?
Well, my view on their defense. As I've said a dozen times before, when your best defensive player was living under a bridge 5 years ago, that says all you need to know. But this isn't a standard Dallas approach to games, to go down 3 touchdowns and then play well. Although, good luck with that going forward with Andy Dalton as your quarterback. Come
on. The Red Rifle's the ultimate redemption story in the making.
Mate, what part of the Cowboys being the most overrated professional sporting team in all of sport don't we get?
Cheerleaders? Cheerleaders are good. Cheerleaders are good.
We sit here going, oh, geez, what's wrong with the Cowboys? What's wrong? Why aren't they winning? Because I'll tell you why. Here's a tip. Because they're not that good, right? They go high profile in certain positions on the field and all the rest of it. But I can't remember their defence. Have they had a good defensive backfield since Neon Dion retired? Seriously.
Sven?
Oh, look, good question. I can't think of anyone that comes to mind. But look, I don't know. But if you talk about Dalton, to me, Dalton is as good as the players that you put around him. And the current crop of offensive players at Dallas are probably better than the players that he had when he was going really well for the Bengals. You know, if you look at Lamb, Gallup, and Amari Cooper plus Elliott, you know, that is a pretty potent mix. And I think Dalton will be able to succeed with those players around him.
I agree with that, but the question is, to the degree that Dak Prescott was doing it, I don't think I doubt that.
No.
And that's what's been needed for them to win a couple of games so far.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. And of course, you will end up with Dallas making the playoffs and losing in the first round.
Yeah,
because that's what Dalton does. So,
so he's gone to the perfect team.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's just history repeating.
Shuttlesworth, here's a stat for you. If Dak Prescott had thrown 2 more pass attempts, not completed passes, pass attempts, he would have qualified for the NFL minimum number of pass attempts to be in the season awards or the season categories for the stat. His current average of passing yards per game is 371.2 passing yards a game, which is nearly 30 yards a game higher than Peyton Manning's all-time record, which was from 2013. How bad is it that he didn't get those 2 attempts in before the injury?
Well, it's terrible. I'm not sure if that's the reason that it's terrible, but
yeah.
I got to say, as an Eagles fan, that's some Dallas karma kicking in right there.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy to see that he was leading the league in passing yards by so much, given their record. But then you look at the way they've started, and he's had to throw them out of and back close to a lot of games. I haven't watched too many Cowboys games, so I'm not sure why they're starting so bad. But even this game, which I felt it felt like a quintessential division game, like 2 teams that sort of just knew each other, and it's always a kind of a bit of a scrappy fight. But yeah, I'm not sure. Like to their defensive backfields, like they had, like Byron Jones was looking like he was going to take the next step, and then he's gone, and that kind of thing. DeMarcus Lawrence got paid, and then they lost their pass rush because he's twiddling his thumbs or doing something. So I'm not sure whether it's the Cowboys and then they add in Mike McCarthy, whose defenses in Green Bay were always under fire. So it's like a combination of whose fault is the defense.
Aussie dude, you would have, as a Green Bay Packers fan, you would have been so surprised to see McCarthy absolutely torch his defensive coordinator on the sidelines. Clearly more of the same Mike McCarthy we've all grown to love, yeah?
Probably, but the thing is, he never really did that at Green Bay because Capers and then even Patton in the later years were always in the press box calling play to get that, that footage of. Yeah, probably. But, he's never really had much of a strong defense. But he is an offensive guy. I don't know if he knows how to really hire a good coordinator or not. But yeah, look, Dallas is probably the best weapons you can put around a game manager to coast you to a playoff spot. Because you even went over them with Gallup and Lamb and Elliott. I'm still not a fan of Cooper, but I still reckon that by the end of the year, Lamb will be their top, and then Cooper might end up being probably their 3rd option, with I reckon Gallup will probably even overtake him.
Yeah, it's fair to say, and we talked about this on the podcast, I think Brash might have been in week 3. Blackie was saying how disappointing CD Lamb had been compared to expectation.
That was me saying that, and then he went and scored a touchdown later. Yeah, his first touchdown for the season. But I can't believe you've pulled up. I know you love your obscure stats, but if I was Dak Prescott and I'm sitting in my hospital bed right now with my ankle up in 3 inches of thick plaster, I don't think I'd be so much regretting not throwing those 2 passes as I would be of signing a contract last off-season.
Oh, yes.
But see, Brash, you're not giving Jerry Jones enough credit. He knew this was going to happen. That's why he franchise tagged him.
Yeah, he deliberately got his ankle broken so he can get less for him. Yeah. So that's got to be horrible for Prescott. And the Cowboys and Prescott can't win either way on this because you're not going to pay full market value, right? You're not going to pay full market value because you don't even know if he's going to even come back, right?
Yeah, well, on one argument, it's worse than Alex Smith's injury.
Well, as long as he doesn't go through the problems Alex happened when he got to the hospital, yeah?
Yeah, with the infection and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, but it's still, what's... how do you give a guy a long-term contract?
No, you can't. But I think the other thing that makes it worse, the other thing that makes it much worse for Prescott, as opposed to many of the others that have been injured, is because he was such a low pick to start with, he's earned bugger all in his first few years in the league, unlike, say, a Sam Darnold or even Alex Smith, who was a relatively high draft pick and had a reasonably remunerative rookie contract. Dak Prescott was on, I believe, his first year, he was on less than $1 million.
It's an average of 600,000.
Yeah, as a rookie, as a third-round draft pick, or fourth, whatever it was, third or fourth. But Alex Smith was first pick overall. Yeah. This is a terrible situation for the Cowboys to be in now, right? Because I tell you who'd be absolutely creaming it right now is Andy Dalton, right? Because Dalton, if he played to your point before about he's got a good supporting cast, if he's not the reason the Cowboys are losing and they're still putting up 25, 30 points a game, then you could probably keep Dalton around for another year.
Well, and arguably, if they put 30 points up and they're still losing, he can turn around and say, well, it's not my fault the other team was scoring more than 30.
Well, no other team's going to sign Prescott, will they? He's a free agent. Technically, he's a free agent at the end of the year. No one's going to sign him.
They won't tag him. They won't tag him again, will they?
Oh, they can tender him. Or no, or can they tender after franchise? I'm not sure.
You can
I don't know if you
tag him again, but it's at a higher rate.
Yeah.
It'll
be, but then if you put that much money on a franchise tag quarterback that you don't know he's going to pay, then how are you going to get another quarterback to actually start?
It's not like you don't have other weapons you got to look after. As Sven mentioned, you got Cooper, you got Elliott's been paid kinda. But what about your offensive line? What about getting some decent capital in on the defense? Yeah,
and you still got a bad defense, and you're still up against the firewall with your salary cap. So it's not a good situation. It could not be a more disastrous situation for the Cowboys.
Yeah, with the drop in the salary cap next year, the last thing that Dallas wants to do is put a second franchise tag on someone who might not be able to play, because it would probably cost Dallas about $40 million.
Yeah. I think it was about 37.
You
37.
can 37. Is it?
Yeah.
It's just way too much money.
See, the ruthlessness in me, the pure business decision, I'd cut him. I'd get an injury settlement and cut him and start again.
Especially if you got a decent insurance package on him, it's harsh.
That would be Prescott's personal financing. But if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm not giving $30 million to a guy I don't know if he's even going to be able to walk straight again.
No, of course not.
From a pure business decision, right? And as terrible as this sounds, and we've spoken about this before on the podcast, I'm not sure Jones is still was ever 100% wedded to Prescott anyway. And we've had this discussion, yeah? Prescott's great for jersey sales and all the rest of it, but I've never really been convinced that Jones is all in on Prescott, because I certainly would have signed Prescott before Zeke, that's for sure, long term.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was interesting that they botched they either should have said to Dak, we're not going to sign you at all, or we're going to sign you. It was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
They can't do that, mate, because the last thing you want to do is a starting quarterback that's getting paid that doesn't give a rat's ass about the win-losses, because he's not going to be there the next year. So, I think it's a terrible situation for Dallas to be in. What I'm really hoping is Prescott shows real recovery before the end of this season. But that's only 5 months away.
Well, and potentially if there's a COVID break, and this sounds like I'm being sarcastic, I'm not. If there's a couple of COVID breaks and we find ourselves in the postseason in, say, late February or early March, it would be interesting if they were able to put him on the field in a moon boot just so he could throw those 2 pass attempts. Because that's I mean, no, I'm being serious, because my view is I don't think there will ever be, I could be wrong, maybe the rules will keep changing, maybe they'll keep changing the flow of the game, but passing for 371.2 yards a game is just insane.
It's a small sample, mate. It's a small sample. It's 4 games.
That's my whole point, though. But that's exactly right.
Other quarterbacks have come out hot before.
Yeah, I totally get it. But my point is that he'd be the only one in history that could actually legitimately capitalise on, hey, I've done my hot streak, and now I'm going to get credit for it and pretend it was a whole season.
Mate, at one stage there, Russell Wilson was on target to throw for 60 points too. So it's early in the season trends, mate, are not, one swallow does not make a summer. So
unless you're on the incentive payment bonus, you get lots of swallows if you're on the incentive payment.
Anyway,
mate. For me, the last game that I really wanted to zero in on, which was, I thought, better than expected. I guess I'd put, but not that much better than expected. But that's only because I was watching the game, just waiting for the Fuey reaction. Was the Ravens Bengals game? Joe Burrows was going to be this great guy. He was already a lock for the Hall of Fame, and he was going to be fantastic. Sven, you talked about a turnstile offensive line in Minnesota. That Bengals front line, that's a little bit more than turnstiles. It's almost not even a road bump.
Yeah, calling it a line is probably the wrong word. So yeah, that's the great thing about the NFL. You can have a really horrible part of your team, but you can always find another team that's worse than you. Yeah, look, the Bengals are in a tough situation, but they will end up with a high draft pick going into next season, and they'll be able to address the O-line going into next season. So, yeah, you just hope that Burrow survives the season and that, that he's not doesn't become another David Carr, so to speak, and he gets through the season unharmed.
Aussie dude, did you get a chance to watch that game with the magnificence of Joe Burrow?
Oh, I think after last week, you have my opinions on Burrow. But no, I didn't watch it. But I'm just not really sure what they can really do to fix it there, because there's more than just an offensive line problem. There's, they'll need weapons. What do they keep? Green, because he's out of contract next year, and so is, they finally get John Ross off their books next year, because that's been an absolute bust of a draft pick. But Cincinnati used to at least have a good defense, and it doesn't really show many signs of that anymore, and they don't have that attitude without Perfect and a couple of the others there anymore, so at least it helps the penalty yard stats come down without a couple of those players there.
I don't know. I mean, I looked at it, and Shuttlesworth, I'm not sure what you thought. I didn't think Lamar Jackson played particularly well in this game, but it was one of those things where the Bengals are just abysmal, defensively and offensively.
Yeah, I didn't take much away from it. It's just two teams and where they're at, really. Like, the Bengals got Burrow because they're terrible, and the Ravens are a team that is hoping to and should be thereabouts. I just, and probably goes to Sven's point too about Burrow and him not turning into, the stories we've all heard before. And the fact that he's getting sacked 7 times a game, and it sounds a bit silly, but he needs to take those sacks a bit better. Like he's being a rookie, and he's trying to show everyone that he's fighting, but he's trying to twist out of these sacks and stuff. And you just watch it, and you think he's going to rip his knees or something. I think they just need to get into it and say it's okay to get sacked. Just go down, just take it.
Or even better, just throw the ball away and don't get sacked at all.
Either that, but it's happening. Just teach him that it's okay.
Yeah. Brash, what do you think? From my point of view,
I was very
wasn't
excited
sure
about the field goal they kicked at the end just to get off the donut. Like, seriously? That was
kickers
are
people too, dude.
That was a highlight of that game, kicking the field goal, the meaningless field goal at the end of the game. But anyway,
that's just special team players making sure they get their end of year bonus.
Yeah, true. I fear for Burrows a little bit too, and I think it's his own bravado that's causing much of the problem as well.
Yeah.
I also think, is it just me, or has Herbert's star risen a bit? His has diminished a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, and not just because, I mean, see, I'm going to take credit for that because I talked Burrow down mainly because I wanted to give Fuey shit, and I talked Herbert up, and that was like a preview of how things have unfolded. So it's like, the whole media world is following BPG's lead, But no, seriously, I think, and it's hard, you think back to that bizarrely successful when we were all in the middle of the early part of the COVID lockdown and we just desperately wanted something to follow. Suddenly there was the NFL draft and we all got drawn into how wonderful Joe Burrows was going to be. By the time Herbert got drafted, people weren't really paying that much attention. And it's kind of, I guess it's not on Joe Burrows' shoulders that he was given that kind of star status before he'd ever stepped on the field. He's not I don't get the sense that he's like a Johnny Football that courts that kind of publicity. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, Aussie dude, you followed college football a bit more than I do. Did he have that kind of a egotistical, high-profile, presence at college?
Towards the end, when everything was just about done, like he did show that cockiness, and then there's that clip of the national championship game. They just scored. They're well and truly up, and he's pointing to his hand where he's going to put his finger and smoking the cigars in the locker room after the game. And
well, in that case, I hope he gets what's coming his way. Sorry.
Yeah, but
we might finish.
Just on that Herbert thing, and he went 1 overall and got drafted by the worst team in the NFL, right? Herbert didn't. Okay, the team he went to was a little bit better. So is Burrows a better quarterback coming out of college? Yes. Is Burrows in a better position? No. So, and it's showing on the field.
Yeah, I think the Chargers were in a position to get Herbert where they did because of injuries as well, which dropped him down a bit.
Yeah.
And that the core or the skeleton, if you will, of the roster is obviously a fair bit better than what the Bengals are working with.
And the Chargers are one of those teams where they've almost had the benefit of extra draft picks because some of their players have come back from injury, and it is almost like, and I think 2 years ago, you guys were in the same boat. You had a bunch of guys that were out injured the season before that came back, and it was like almost having a second set of draft picks because they were fresh and ready to go again. But for me, we might wrap it up with, in terms of the game reviews, with what I thought was far and away the most disappointing of the games for the week. I was really looking forward to this one, and I thought it was a bit of a fizzer in the end. It was an upset, and that was the game today. I thought the Bills-Titans game was going to be really tight and interesting, and it wasn't. What do you think, Aussie dude?
How does a team that hasn't played in, 16 days or whatever, look so fresh if they haven't, trained or anything? Like, they've looked as good as any team, and the Bills looked about as bad as they've looked in quite a few years, probably since Rex Ryan was still their head coach. But
ooh, boy.
I just don't know what happened. Like, the Bills just played absolutely terrible. Their defense couldn't stop anything, and on offense, there was some questionable decisions in play calls and, absolutely some pretty questionable throws. But even if Josh Allen didn't throw those, probably 3 interceptions by the end, they wouldn't have won because the defense couldn't stop anything. Like, Tennessee had at least 2 run-in touchdowns that were untouched the entire way.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how a team can look so fresh. Like, is the NFL going to have another inquiry to see if they had those illegal workouts and what they were doing again?
It was the Ryan Tannehill illegal workouts. Personally, I think it was just because Ryan Tannehill's not coached by Adam Gase anymore. Hey, Sven, did you guys already do a trade, Kirk Cousins for Josh Allen, and they just left Kirk Cousins in Josh Allen's uniform? Is that why the Bills were suddenly so bad?
Oh, look, who knows? I haven't watched this game, but it's interesting you start talking about the Bills' defence not showing up because the Bills have been pretty solid on defence, and you would sort of wonder if it's just they just didn't show up for the game, which is that can always happen. Or whether or not teams are starting to work them out because they're becoming, they're getting to the top of the AFC, so teams are just taking more notice of particular traits and stuff like that. I'd be, like I said, I haven't seen the game, but I'd be definitely interested in your guys' thoughts on that.
Brash, is that something that you're a big proponent of the idea that the more time people get studied on film, the more they get understood and the more they get picked apart? You agree with Sven on that one?
Yeah, 100%. And there's a couple of things we've spoken about already. I think Sven was talking, or Shuttleworth was talking before about abbreviated pre-seasons and how it hurts defence. Here's another team that had 2 starting cornerbacks and their best linebacker out. So the issue is not so much then the obvious drop in talent, but now you've got backup cornerbacks who are getting bugger all reps in training camp anyway. So the Bills, like Tannehill, that's the best I've seen Tannehill play, to be fair. Josh Norman probably wishes he missed the game after the best. You guys aren't old enough, but I certainly remember a guy called Mal Meninga for Australia.
Yes.
Mal Meninga gave a don't argue to this little French winger one night in a wet, cold test match in Grafton or somewhere like that, 30 years ago. That's the best don't argue I've seen since then, right? So I think everything the Bills could have done wrong, they did, and everything the Titans could have done right, they did. I don't get how fresh they were on that. Tannehill, maybe that's how Tannehill plays. Maybe he looked. That's the best I've seen him play. Easily,
agree with that.
Easily. But it didn't start well. Tipped intercept early, and then Allen threw a couple of his trademark off balance, scrambling out of the pocket, rocket touchdown passes. And I thought, okay, they're getting on. But they never bridged the gap. Every time they looked like they'd get back into it, the Titans were just better than them.
And it wasn't like there was shockingly bad turnovers.
The first one was pretty bad. The first one.
Yeah, but not. There wasn't like 5. There wasn't like 4 or 5 in a row. Unlike sorry guys, I promised I wouldn't go back, but I will. In the Vikings Seattle game, like I mentioned before, you had the Seattle managed to score 3 touchdowns in less than 2 minutes, in part because of 2 horrible defensive turnovers. That didn't happen. The Bills were just outclassed, just consistently outclassed. But yeah, it was an interesting game. But I thought and funny, very much like the Chiefs Ravens game, a real letdown
Raiders.
In one sense, in that it wasn't as sorry.
Sorry, mate. I thought you were talking about this week's game. Sorry.
No. I was saying what I'm saying is, for me, it was the same as the game between the Chiefs and the Ravens a couple of weeks back on Monday Night Football, which everybody was building up as the game of the round for that week, and it was really failed to deliver. I mean, if at the beginning of the round somebody had told you that either the Saints Chargers or the Bucks Bears was going to be the game of the week compared to this game between the Bills and the Titans, people would have said you need your head read. And yet, for me, that's how the week played out. I thought it was a real disappointing and anticlimactic game. Aussie dude?
Yeah, I was going to say, just on the how Brash was saying that was probably the second best. Don't argue his thing. I still reckon that it's only Derrick Henry's second best stiff arm of all time, behind the Earl Thomas one from the playoffs last year, where he turned Earl Thomas into the lead blocker for a second.
Sven, what did you say, man? Sven?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just the other thing too is you've got a game that gets. Admittedly, it was like a Tuesday night game, so I don't know what the coverage was like in the States, whether or not it was put forward as a primetime game, whether or not it got national coverage, all that kind of stuff. But I do think that a team like the Bills aren't necessarily used to exposure like that. They've just sort of been under the radar. A little bit like the Vikings in that they have they're the 1 o'clock team, and there's a lot of other games on at the same time. So I just wonder what Josh Allen's mindset was like going into the game, knowing that there was that was the one and only game on at that time.
And I mean, Buffalo have always been the third New York team, haven't they? Right outside the media spotlight.
But they've also been the best New York team for the last recent years. But
Mate, that's a low freaking bar. That's a bloody low bar. But yeah, Sven, I mean, just picking up your point there, Sven, just to I mean, it's obviously injuries played a part, as Brash pointed out. The Bills' defense was ravaged by injuries. Is it really one of those things where Josh Allen hasn't yet really been through a deep playoff run, where he's been under scrutiny and had a lot of expectations? Because, again, not to bring it back too much to AFL, but it reminds me a lot of Fremantle in 2013 when they made it all the way to the grand final, but in a year when nobody expected them to do well, when in the next 2 years, when they had that burden of people expected them to improve and do better, all of a sudden under the spotlight, we crumbled. Do you get the sense that maybe Josh Allen's struggling with the same kind of, now I've got to prove I'm the real deal, not just to have a great year?
Oh, look, I think it is a fact that Josh Allen is a confidence player, right? He can have great games, but he's known for being inaccurate as a quarterback. And if he gets off to a bad start, I'm not sure if he's got the tools or the experience at this stage to put himself back on the right track. So the question will be, can he develop that, or is he just one of these streaky players that will have great games and really horrible games? And
is that a maturity thing?
That's that, and no one knows. Right? You don't really know at this stage, because you'll only know that when you've got enough games under the belt to work out the traits. You know, that's the thing with the NFL, is that your sample size is so small. You know, you look at Major League Baseball and, you know, the stats are based on hundreds of games and all this kind of stuff, whereas the NFL is only 16 games a year, and it's very hard to work out whether or not you're talking about, you know, data points that are outside the range or inside the range or stuff like that. So I think with Josh Allen, you'll know in 5 years' time, something like that, because I would expect that the Bills will keep him around, because he's shown that he's a capable NFL player. But is he a Kirk Cousins, like is a mobile Kirk Cousins, let's say, who can win the games that you're expected to win and occasionally win a game that you're not expected to win, but all the other times it's, you know, 50-50 or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. And this is the fascinating thing about the NFL. You just never know what the trajectory is going to be. You know, Tannehill at the moment is on a complete another tear, you know, as far as playing. You know, he played out of his skin in the second half of last year, and he seems to have carried on this year. You know, no one really saw that at Miami, and, you know, good on him. You know, he's turned it around. So
he's as I said in the weekly thread, he's exhibit number 6,752 in the museum of Adam Gase as a really shit coach.
yeah, that's right.
Whereas, I mean, for me, Josh Allen, you know, we were just talking about Dak Prescott. You know, Brash gave a really good summary of how difficult it was for Jerry to commit to giving Dak that long-term contract. I can see the Pagulas agonizing over Josh Allen in 2 or 3 years if he doesn't turn it around, if he doesn't become more consistent, you know. And that seems really harsh when everybody was building the Bills up to have a great run and they were starting so well. But when you look closely at him, an absolute shit ton of their success in the first 4 weeks of this year was on their defense, not on Josh Allen, you know. I don't know.
It's one of the great questions in the NFL is how much do you pay a average quarterback? Because it seems to be a lot of money at the moment.
Arguably the most overpaid position for performance.
Yep.
Yeah, like the elite are the elite. Yeah, they are what they win games on their own back. They win with no-name receivers. They win with no offensive line. They win with defenses giving up 40 points. But the differential between, say, the 15th ranked quarterback in the league, 16th ranked quarterback, and the guy who's a gap filler in the 22nd, 28th, 29th type ranked quarterback, there's a big differential in their earnings, but probably not a lot of differential in their capacity to win games for their teams.
Oh, and I mean, you could argue that at least 2 of the top 5 paid quarterbacks in Wentz and Cousin would be in the bottom 5 performers.
Well,
that's also the fear of, if you do let them walk, that you think you can get stuck with, like, you know, someone who's absolutely useless, like, I don't know.
Steve DeBerg?
well, at least he had some good after him, but, you'd get you let them walk and you'll basically fear you'll end up with, Brock Osweiler or, one of the many bad QB drafts from John Elway or one of the other teams that have had just some of the most dismal QB drafts over the last 10 years, because that's why they do get overpaid, and that's also why you have a lot of teams that were pushing for the QB to be paid outside of the salary cap.
Brash, what do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, look, I'm just projecting. Unfortunately, I'm projecting about on the 49ers, and I had high hopes. I honestly, genuinely thought Garoppolo was our future as an example, but he's turning into a Midland quarterback at best, right? And
if you had the choice, would you take him or Bridgewater? That says everything. The silence says everything. It's a hard choice, isn't it? Because I'm the same. If I had to pick between Wentz and Bridgewater.
And the reason I sigh is referring back to my earlier comments about Shanahan's pig-headedness around what a quarterback should be for his system. That's why I'm sighing, because he might get like, what would Mahomes look like under him? Would he scold him for going off script? So would he?
Or Lamar Jackson? You'd never see Lamar.
Yeah, would he beat that stuff out of him? The thing that I'm becoming envious of, and I thought Garoppolo certainly was better than this before he got injured, definitely before his knee injury the year before last, is all of a sudden the 49ers quarterbacks are just statues in the pocket. I'm envious of guys, like I was watching Allen today, and as much as he didn't play that well, the number of times he just gets away and his pocket awareness of where the defenders are, that does not seem to be an important trait to a Shanahan quarterback.
No.
Quite happy to. Yeah. And remember, he was the offensive coordinator there when RG3 got thrown to the wolves, yeah?
Yeah. Here's a stat
that's
for
why
you.
That's why I'm sighing. Yeah.
Well, just on that, here's a stat for you, and I was going to save it for later on, but it's appropriate when you're talking about how statuesque the Niners quarterbacks are under Shanahan. In the first 5 weeks of this season, quarterbacks have rushed for 2,621 yards and 36 touchdowns. That's the most in NFL history in 5 weeks.
Sorry, say that stat again.
2,621 yards rushing and 36 touchdowns in 5 weeks by quarterbacks. That's quarterbacks, not cornerbacks, because of my accent. In week 4, Kyler Murray scored his 5th rushing touchdown, which is only the 4th quarterback since the merger in 1970 to run for 5 TDs in 4 weeks. The others were Terry Bradshaw, Cam Newton, and Cordell Stewart. So whatever's happened, quarterbacks are suddenly, generally across the league, rushing and running a lot. Now, maybe it's the Lamar Jackson effect. I don't know. The fact is, we talked about it last week, Josh Allen is far and away out there and way in front as the most rushing TD quarterback in the first 3 weeks of the year. He was way up there.
Well, that's one thing that the Titans didn't allow this week, is
exactly
he's had a rushing touchdown coming in. He had one in 3 or 4 games.
He'd scored one in every one of the first 3 weeks, and he came within inches in week 4, like absolute inches, and they just clamped him, didn't they? And so I don't know. Maybe the 49ers are ahead of the time and going back to standing still.
No, I think it's trending the other way, mate.
One thing I noticed with Garoppolo, though, and as discussed earlier, it might be a combination of a lot of things, the O-line at the moment and the fact that he was injured, but he reminded me of Derek Carr when he came back from injury. He was jittery and nervous looking. He didn't want to be in there at all. And he was just obviously making terrible decisions as a result. But
the exact opposite of Alex Smith's attitude, wasn't it?
Yeah. You could tell he didn't want to be in there.
Yeah. Garoppolo was jumpy and fidgety, and that interception he threw, the first interception he threw, was like, I could pass the damn ball better than that. And shit.
You look at that ball where it was thrown, that first interception. It's a deep route on the sideline, and he throws it 5 yards inside the line. No one throws it there. Right? It's almost like he was throwing it to the safety.
Well, and it looked to me like it was an actual physical, and I don't mean this in a nasty way. I don't mean to be picking on the guy, but it looked to me like and this happens a lot. I play baseball in a very low grade baseball, and I pick the ball up every so often, and I go to throw it from second base to first base, which is only about 35 feet. And in my youth, I could throw that easily, and the ball goes about 3 feet and then just drops in the dirt, and everybody stands and laughs at me.
Go Charlie Brown.
Exactly, yeah. And it was exactly that same sort of thing. It was like Garoppolo in his mind was sure he was throwing it hard enough to get to the receiver.
Yeah, he was throwing ducks all over the place in the game.
But his body just fell, you know?
If you want any proof of it, the week before Mullins hit Kittle 15 times. Right, against behind the same line, probably, arguably, no better or worse team defensively. Kittle coming back in his first game catches 15 balls. Kittle was hardly sighted second game with Garoppolo in there. So there was something wrong. It's just it's one of two things. Either they're mailing it in this year because Corona's all just getting too much from. Remember, they're in California, so it's a little bit different than being in Florida. I think people underestimate the impact of what state you're living in as well with this Corona. Like Florida, there's crowds. 49ers have dropped 3 home games.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no crowds there. There's no, it's a massive disadvantage.
I think it's also deeper, and, American Crow, as somebody that lives in Arizona, he talked about this when he was on last week. It isn't just potentially the home crowds. It's also the fact that when they go home, because they live in California, which is one of the states that has the tighter restrictions, they're under, particularly when they've traveled interstate to hotspot states, they're under restrictions in their own personal lives. And I mean, you can turn around and say, well, they're earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. They should be able to deal with that. But the fact is, the human being, and that can have an effect on them. But yeah, look, we've talked a lot about quarterbacks, and I mean, there's nothing else really to talk about from any of those games. Clearly the Chiefs are still the best. There was no upsets at all in the week. You'd clearly agree with that, wouldn't you, Shuttlesworth? There was no other game that we need to talk about, really? No surprises?
Just on that one that you did allude to, I did know the change or the corner that Derek Carr seems to have turned. I mean, it helps that he does have some weapons that can take the top off, but as I mentioned before, when he came back from that injury and he looked, jittery and nervous in the pocket, watching him in that game, he was happy to hang around in there and move around a bit, avoid a few sacks here and there, and then hit up a target. So something. Hang
on. What game are we talking about again?
The Raiders and the Chiefs.
Hey, the Chiefs won that one easy, didn't they?
Yeah, if you want. In BPG's land, if that's what we're going with.
Yeah.
Oh, did Derek Carr come out and play well? Because Fuey said he was a good quarterback. And I might have given Fuey some shit about that. Oops.
Well, Mahomes is pretty ordinary all the time.
By his lofty standards, he looked somewhat human in that game.
Kansas. See, Kansas City is a team that relies on their quarterback as well. So, the drop off when he's not playing his best shows in the performance of the team. Just on Mahomes, can someone teach him how to walk properly?
He is a frog, though.
Oh, mate, he walks like he's got seriously, he's got a baseball bat shoved up his ass. It's just. And the other thing that he's getting an annoying habit of doing, of baiting defensive players to hit him late, and one of them's going to do it soon.
Well, on the sideline last week, yeah.
There were 2 on the sideline last week, he did.
Yeah. And then he wanted the flag for it as well.
Yeah, one where he baited by just standing on the sideline, then stepping out, and then another time that little touch in the back where he went flying. He seems to do it a bit more where he's just sort of baiting the defensive player to hit him late. And for me, that's the worst penalty in all of football at the moment. The random calling of unnecessary roughness on defenseless hits on quarterbacks. It's just rubbish. There was one in the 49er Miami game where Beatard, the 49ers quarterback, literally chest slapped the defensive player and got it was chest to chest, and Beatard didn't even fall over and got a penalty, and it was for my team, so it's not like rose-coloured glasses or anything like that. It was the worst penalty I've ever seen, and it kept the drive alive, and then the 49ers scored a touchdown 2 plays later. So I'm tired of those penalties influencing game the way they do, especially with what we were talking about before with those moments in games. And I know BPG, you're big on the trends of games. I'm getting a little bit tired of those sorts of penalties influencing games. They're hidden penalties, right? You don't notice them as they're happening. But when you lose by 3 points because someone got to extend a drive and score a touchdown instead of kicking a field goal, that hurts.
Now, I'm going to be a bit of a "I told you so," which, as Brasher will tell you, never happens on this podcast. I never say "I told you so." But at the beginning of the season, when we did our preseason reviews, I said that I thought the Chiefs' defense was worse this year, and that while Chris Jones might be okay, I didn't think they had a lot of depth. For the first 4 weeks of the year, I looked like an absolute idiot. The Chiefs' defense held up really well. What do you think, Shuttlesworth? Was this a week where actually finally somebody showed how to score on the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think so. It remains to be seen how much of just the right matchup the Raiders are for it with their speed, like and that. But it was a case of, as good as Mahomes is, you've let them get too far ahead and get their confidence up. And, he's not always going to be able to bridge that gap.
And the Raiders don't have a bad backfield. They're a reasonable, let's face it, in a season in which the backfield seemed to be falling down like 10 pins, they've actually kept most of their starting backfield together, Hey, Sven, is it really a case of, Brash gave us this big speech about when the 49ers played the Chiefs, that it was all about you had to take on Mahomes. Is that what happened? Did the Raiders get aggressive, or was it more that the Chiefs failed to deliver?
Yeah, I'd put it more on the. I think the Raiders out-chiefed the Chiefs. They thought that it was speed on speed, and it was just the last person standing. In these kinds of games, it's just which offense fires first, and it looks like the Raiders fired first, and can someone make a stop? And the Raiders just made the one stop they needed to make, and the Chiefs ended up being a 2-point touchdown behind. So you could argue. I haven't had a look at how many points KC have scored in each of their games this year, but 32 points probably not enough on the day.
It would win you most games, but not this year. Not when we've seen teams.
Well, we've had 50-point games this year already, I think. And this is where supposedly the first 4 weeks is normally where all the really bad games are, and things settle down as the season progresses. But I think this year it might be a little bit longer. And look, I've no doubt that I think KC will still be favourites to get the 1 or the 2 seed out of the AFC. I think they're head and shoulders above most teams. And of course, this game is just a divisional matchup. They're the ones that are the hardest ones to win. That's why we love the divisions that we've got, because it's the games against the teams that that are the ones that are the least predictable. And the Raiders just came out on top on the day. So
you were right, Brash. You go 1-on-1, you go hard on them, and you might have a chance of beating them.
I think absolutely you do. If I was playing the Chiefs, I wouldn't even dress my punter for the day. I'd go for it on 4th down every time. Who cares? Who cares if you give Mahomes a short field or a long field? It's the same result. So what that game reminded me a little bit of was 2 years ago when the Rams played the Chiefs in that pinball game. And then by the end of the year, Belichick comes out and says, settle down, right, in the Super Bowl. It's the same thing. 2 weeks ago or last week when the Pats played the Chiefs, they came close for a long time. And now after the Chiefs dropped this game and taking until the third quarter to score a touchdown against the Patriots the week before, are they maybe not firing that well? Maybe they're not as good as we all think. Mate.
Well, I mean, there's an argument to say that if the Pats had Cam Newton instead of a Brian Hoyer
they probably would.
Oh God, yeah, and they win comfortably. Their defense dominated the Chiefs, and the Chiefs' defense was not that flash against the truly shitful quarterback. Aussie dude, what do you think? We might wrap it up with your observations on the surprise game of the week. Yeah. Or did you predict the result? You tipped it in AE, didn't you?
Which one? The
Raiders
KC
Chiefs.
game? Oh, no, I tipped the Chiefs. And it came back and burned me. No, I thought you were going to throw back my hot take from last week.
Oh, I'm not that cruel. That would be cruel and inhumane punishment. We'll save that
no.
for the end of season review episode.
I'm still sticking by it. I still think he is Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler had good games.
A couple.
Jay
Anything
Cutler also
else?
never had the Raiders' weapons.
Oh, well, and this, for me, the one thing that jumped out, and I don't know, I mean, Shuttlesworth and Sven, I don't know how much focus you guys paid on the wide receiver class this year. Obviously, CD Lamb got a lot of the high-profile media coverage. I thought you guys did very well with your rookie wide receivers that you drafted in Minnesota, but Ruggs got a lot of hype, I guess, to the Raiders, and I thought he's been pretty poor for most of the year. Geez, he exploded, didn't he, in this game? Really came out and dominated, I thought.
Yeah, look, it was just one of those. I think it was one of those matchup games, and there's no doubt that the crop of wide receivers from the last draft, it was the best wide receiver class for some time, and they're all looking promising. And it used to be back in the good old days, you'd have to wait until season 2 for wide receivers to fire and all that kind of stuff. But it just seems to be a trend that I don't know what it is, because they're certainly not running NFL routes in college, but they just seem to be, I don't know, better prepared or something like that, or maybe offensive coordinators have just worked out better ways of getting them into the game than they used to. And it's good to see. And the Vikings gave up a great player in Stephon Diggs, but I'd rather have Jefferson on a rookie contract than Diggs on $15 million a year.
Especially as a small market team,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and sorry for concentrating on the Vikings so much, but Kirk Cousins will not throw the ball to someone if he thinks they're covered. Now, Diggs didn't like that because he knew that he could win a one-on-one matchup even if he was covered. But
a bit like OBJ, that kind of confidence that you can beat the defender.
Right. And that's what caused the schism between Diggs and Cousins. And there were quite a few times where Diggs would be on the sideline just saying to Cousins, for God's sake, just throw it to me. If I can't catch it if you don't throw it to me. And he would just take the check down every time. And, so Diggs is in a better place at the Bills because Josh Allen will definitely throw it to him. So it's a win-win for both. It's a win for the Vikings and it's a win for the Bills. And Jefferson is just one of a whole bunch of wide receivers that look like they're going to be really good this season, which is great to see.
Especially because Green Bay didn't bother drafting any, did they? Brash?
No, we just signed one that was a free agent who opted out. Back on the rookie wide receivers, there's 5 that are on pace for 1,000-yard seasons. Now, that's absolutely insane for rookies.
Yeah.
And in terms of rookie seasons, there's 7 in the top 25 at the moment for, 7 of this year's rookies in the top 25 rookie seasons for average scrimmage yards. And it's not just your Lambs and Jeffersons, but it's also Claypool and Ruggs and even Judy and Ayuk and was it Shenot at the Jags is in there.
Yeah, he's been impressive.
It's an awesome class. It's an awesome class. You could argue that it's the best positional draft class of ever at this stage in the first year.
Best since 14, because 14 had Beckham and Evans with I think Cooks, Watkins.
Yeah, but I think 14 will be put to shame by this year. It's important to remember that Ayuk's not been healthy. Jalen Rager's not played a game yet of significant, and arguably there are another 2 wide receivers in the top 20 that were taken that haven't even been on the field much. So yeah, I think long term it's a frightening quality class. It really is. It's potentially best in 30 years, and that's a big call. And obviously, the NFL's changed a lot. But I think the thing that stands out for me is it's not just been, and that's where it's different from 2014, where OBJ in that first year in his rookie year, just had a phenomenal year from go to start to finish. And there were 2 or 3 others that had standouts. This year it's a bit different. You know, as we mentioned earlier on, CD Lamb had a really slow start, but he's hit his stride. You know, Judy's looked good in the beginning, but he's pared back a little bit. Justin Jefferson, you know, he's absolutely been consistent. So yeah, it's and Ruggs this week. Ruggs in the game just played against the Chiefs. So it's really interesting to see that it's more than just 1 or 2 star wide receivers that have been drafted. It's actually the whole damn class is pretty good. You know,
it is a good class, but temper it by the fact, you know, we've talked about tonight, we've talked about things like all the offensive records that are being set and the pace and the number of points and all the rest of it. And as we keep saying on the podcast, there's some of the most god-awful defensive backfields I've ever seen in the NFL at the moment.
True.
And even if you're down 1 or 2, like there's so many teams that don't have 2 reliable starting cornerbacks, and you need a third mandatory now in the slot, mandatory. Most of the tight ends are catching tight ends these days. Hardly any of them stay in the block. So there's a lot going on in the defensive backfield. So you've got these rookie wide receivers that, you know, the number 1 cornerback is not going to them, right? So they're getting 3rd and 4th. And with the way the injuries are going, they're getting guys off practice squads standing, trying to pick them up, right? So that doesn't detract, because that would be all right for maybe if there were 2 or 3. But the very volume of how many suggests to me that this is a great class.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them landed in the right spot too.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Like you look at Ruggs, and he may look like he's been down, but that's because until this game's performance is exactly what he's there for. The speed to break that one open for the long TD. You know, you got Waller and Renfro and that are your possession receivers that are going to, you know, have your 5-6, you know, catches a game. But Ruggs, unless he breaks that big one open, it's not going to look like he's done his part, but he has.
Yeah. And just one thing you mentioned before about Carr, and it's again, there's 2 things that absolutely frustrate me in 49ers football. One is the lack of ability to make something happen on your feet, not as a design play, but when needed, right? Scrambling for that 8-yard first down type thing. The other thing the 49ers fundamentally refused to do under the Shanahan offense, and again, Cousins came into the league under Shanahan, so there's another guy that is affected by it. We absolutely refuse to throw balls to wide receivers to go win the ball. The only type bloke we do it to is Kittle. And if I'm going to throw a pass that's a chance to being intercepted, I'm not going to throw it 10 metres. I'm going to throw it 60. And it's frustrating. I genuinely, and I've watched every 49ers snap in one way, shape or form since forever. I can't remember the last time there was either a post pattern or a sideline pass that went more than 30 yards where the wide receiver had to go and get the ball. I genuinely can't. Maybe when Moss played his cameo year for us, I don't know. I can genuinely cannot remember. Like that great touchdown that Ayuk scored 2 weeks ago, that's how the 49ers wide receivers scored touchdown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right back to Jerry
Rice
days.
Yard after carry.
Yeah.
And that's where Cousins is as well. And that's what Cousins got groomed to do. The system creates a separation. Put the ball in the hand of the playmaker, then it's about yards after carry.
I mean,
yards after catch.
Thielen's a really good example of that sort of receiver, you know?
Fucking crossing routes all day. Cross all day. And that's why Diggs got the shits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a disappointing thing out of the Saints-Chargers games, that incredible Mike Williams catch, which should have won them the game. You know, it's just a shame that wasn't rewarded with the field goal going through, because those kind of things these days are getting rarer, and it's just, you know, it's one of, I'm sure everyone here's, you know, favourite things, you know, specifically for Sven and I, you know, watching Randy Moss highlights are just amazing. And it's a thing that is getting more scarce in the league, because it's all about time of possession and that kind of thing.
But I also think it's because college football doesn't have the same focus on that sort of wide receiver play anymore. You know, college football is so much more in the last 15, 20 years about your Johnny football quarterback play, or if you're going to play a heavy wide receiver passing game, it's not that kind of Randy Moss designed West Coast offense. It's volume, and it's you know, get the ball and then run up the middle of the field as if you're a running back. But I did want to just add one thing to what you were saying, Brash, about the wide receiver core, and that is the other thing that stands out for me. And I was very pessimistic about this. I thought there was a lot of over hype. It hasn't just been a great year for wide receivers, for the rookies. God damn, the running backs there's been a couple of running backs, especially Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but also Taylor, J.K. Dobbins. God, there's been some talent there in the running back. So it's not like the wide receiver class was good because the running backs were shit. It's just been a really talented year. Anyway, maybe that's and the bizarre thing is it's in a year where the rookies have had no preseason. They've had virtually no preparation. So to me, they get more points. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised at all to see rookies really out of sync, like they were in the AFL, really out of sync, really not up to speed. And yet it's been the reverse. The rookies have come in and absolutely dominated. Anyway, maybe that's just me being positive because I can't be positive about my own shitful team.
There's a little wonder that makes me think about is how many of these players may have benefited from less expectations coming in and say, look, we know you're fast, we know you can do this, just do that. We'll worry about getting into detail next year, where some of these guys might really start to get bogged down in the X and O's and struggle, whereas now they're just being told, go out there, use your physical tools, get it done.
Yeah,
Keep it simple, stupid.
Here's the 4 plays that we want you to memorise.
Yeah,
and that's it. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Or maybe because they're all doing Zoom meetings and the coach can look them all in the eye, like the Brady Bunch, that none of them are cutting up or texting on their phones in the background, right? Because they're all on the Zoom meetings. They're actually paying attention in the team meetings.
Look out for the next podcast. It's going to be on video.
No.
Not while Fuey or Brasher are involved. Let me friggin' tell you that.
I can tell you not until barbershops open or hairdressers open in Victoria.
I understand that one. Yeah.
I just wonder how much job it is. Just terrible.
The mullet is 18 inches long, and it's getting longer every day. So anyway, but we won't go there. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to talk about from week 5 before we wrap it up?
You would have thought after playing for 67 years in the NFL, you'd remember when it was 4th down, yeah?
Isn't that like when it's not 1st, 2nd, or 3rd down?
Maybe because now they've got the digital numbers as opposed to the old flipboards they used to have for the down marker. That's confused him.
Maybe Bill didn't let Tom count.
Yeah. Maybe Bill used to have to stick his fingers up to tell him what they were.
Is it that, or is it what I'm always accused of at work as a manager, where I don't let them think, so they just get used to me telling them it's 3rd down, it's 4th down, and that when I'm having a coughing fit in the corner and they don't hear a voice, they just guess what down it is.
But what I love, I do have a lot of respect for Arians. He doesn't give a shit how great, how to spell goat. He doesn't give a shit at all. He takes no bullshit from Brady at all. Every time, he threw him under the bus on his passing early in the season, and straight away, when he got questioned about that 4th down, he said he knew it was 4th down. That's not an excuse. So I love how Arians takes no shit at all from Brady at all.
And just quietly, I reckon that's exactly what Brady's needed. You can get treated as a phenomenon and the greatest of all time too much. Yeah. We've all seen that in certain AFL players. I just think sometimes having a bit of an honest coach is not a bad thing. Thank you for that, gentlemen. That was really good. We might wrap it up and we'll look at the preview for week 6. We'll be with you in a second.